What's up, everybody? Welcome to You Rankin with Me. I am your host, Chadwick Webb, and we have my co-host over there, James Tancock. And today we are ranking Wes Anderson. Oh, the end's cut off there, but that's okay. This has actually been a ranking that's been like long in the works. We've had people watching these movies for like a year, trying to really just figure out their thoughts on Wes Anderson. And we're finally getting around to it, and I'm very excited. But we have featured regular people that appear on here. We have my wife, Kerri Webb, down there, and we have my buddy, Charles Mullen. Without further ado, we can go ahead and explain how this works. Actually, let me show you what the movies are first. I made a little bit of list. We have Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, The Royal Tenenbaums, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, The Darjeeling Limited, Fantastic Mr. Fox, Moonrise Kingdom, The Grand Budapest Hotel, Isle of Dogs, The French Dispatch, Asteroid City, and The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, and three more. So those last ones are a little bit of like shorts that we decided, hey, let's cram them together in like one thing, because if you go on Netflix, there's like a 90-minute version of it that's like, kind of a feature length thing with just all the shorts. So we're like, let's do a list of 12. That's what we're gonna do. But first, let's have these rules. All the panelists made their own rankings, and then we'll reveal the rankings. Lowest ranked first. Now, if there's something that's in I said top 5 there, but honestly, with 12, I think we should do a top 3. So if something that someone ranks like a little bit lower is in your top 3, just say wait for it, hold off on that. Let's talk about that later. And then at the end, we'll give you our combined ultimate ranking. Without further ado, let's get into it. We're gonna go around. We're gonna say what our 12s are, and then we'll figure out when there's something we can talk about, when there's like kind of a unanimous thing, which I don't know if there's anything unanimous about Wes Anderson. Let's find out. My number 12 is The French Dispatch. James.
I have Bottle Rocket.
All right, Charles.
I have Asteroid City.
Nice. Kerri.
I have Bottle Rocket.
All right. And there's two consensus right there, but let's do our 11s just to see. My number 11 is The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, and three more. James, what is your 11?
I had Rushmore.
Ooh, yeah, that's a wait for it.
Charles, that's a wait. That's a wait for it for me as
well. What's your 11, Charles?
The Royal Tenenbaums.
Okay, Kerri.
My 11 is The Wonderful. Oh my gosh, I should know. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, and three more. Sorry.
All right.
I wanted to say The Wonderful World, and I was like, that's not right.
I almost wrote that on the thing, but So we're still not at a true consensus with like three or more. So let's say our number 10s. But Kerri's keeping track, so I don't have to.
That's Kerri.
I'll just say my 10. My 10 is Asteroid City. James.
I had Isle of Dogs.
Ooh, okay. Charles.
Moonrise Kingdom.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Kerri.
My number 10 is The Royal Tenenbaums.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense for Charles. I know his thoughts on that. All right. So, Kerri, I think we could probably talk about Asteroid City now. I think that's been mentioned 3 times.
Oh, yeah.
And has it? Wait.
Okay. I mentioned it once. And Kerri,
yeah,
you just mentioned it, right?
And it's my number 10.
Oh, yeah.
I've only been mentioned twice.
Okay. Well, then let's go through our 9s, because I think
you haven't mentioned it, right?
James, you didn't mention Asteroid.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything has at most 2 right now.
Oh,
all right. So
interesting.
We're gonna have a consensus here at 9. So I'll say my number 9 is Bottle Rocket. James, what is your 9?
I had Royal Tenenbaums.
Okay. Charles, 9.
Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, and three more. We're
Okay.
definitely
and Kerri-
starting to build some consensus.
Yep. Kerri, what is your 9?
My number 9 is Fantastic Mr. Fox.
All right.
Wait
So,
for it.
That's a wait for it
That's a
for
wait
me
for
as
it.
well.
oh yeah, it's a way for me as well. So
Oh
Kerri,
my goodness.
You all like this movie way more than I do.
what's can we talk about like Bottle Rocket now?
We can talk about Bottle Rocket and the wonderful story of Henry Sugar and 3 more, and the Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, cool.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. So yeah, I'll at the top. I'll just start with Bottle Rocket. Bottle Rocket is really interesting. Is Wes Anderson's first movie, so it doesn't really have his style there. It's not really symmetrical and super like detail oriented as like Wes Anderson typically gets, so it's less weird, although there are some weird stuff in it. There's some strange characters like Dignan and stuff, but it kind of feels more like just your kind of average independent film, which I don't think is a negative. I had it at 9, so I don't think it's as sharp as some of his other really great ones, but I also don't think it's as bad as some other. I don't want to say bad. I don't think he has like bad movies. There's just ones that I enjoy less. But I think Bottle Rocket does have, like a good personality about it. I like the idea of like this kind of youth having a plan and writing down your plan and like wanting to aspire to crime. I think is a really interesting thing there. It feels very Texas because the Wilsons and Wes Anderson grew up in Texas, I believe, and so they just made a movie together and wrote it together, and I really like it. I like how the one brother is so structured and wants to follow through with this thing, and then the other brother is like, nah, I'm just gonna go do this other thing right now. Even when it opens up and Luke Wilson's character's like, the doctor's like, you're in here voluntary. It's like I just want to let him have this. I'm just trying to make my friend happy. And and then he falls in love, and that kind of throws a wrench in the plans and stuff like that. And I mean, yeah, it's just one of those where he hadn't found his style yet, but you see little blips of what Wes Anderson would become, and that's why I love watching like debut films from like filmmakers who are so like I don't want to say prestigious, but just like in the conversation of some of the best, and then you're just like, check out this first film. Was it good? Was it bad? Was it they hadn't found their style yet? There's so many I think that are like that, and Wes Anderson, you can see a little bit in there, but not the full thing. So I think Bottle Rocket's pretty good. I like it a lot, but I had it at number 9, so it's on the lower half. James, how do you feel about Bottle Rocket?
Yeah, there was a lot that you kind of summed up pretty well, Chad. It was an interesting like story overall. I think when I first watched this, it didn't quite just connect with me because again, the other movies I'd seen by Anderson were just more of him like in a zone more or less. So this one, it like you were saying, there are like you can tell what he was like going to do in the future with a little bit of like things here and there with some of like the dialogue exchanges and like just the characters, just the way he did them in this one. You like it's evident in his later stuff like what maybe his plan was or like how he found like what he really wanted to do, but there's just too much else that I think I liked more than this one. But it's definitely not a bad movie though.
Yeah, for sure. Charles.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in agreement. I had Bottle Rocket a little bit above everyone else, but I do agree with everything that you said. I think I put Bottle Rocket for me at I think I put it at number 8. So like not that high up on my list. But I think for me, I feel like Bottle Rocket's kind of like the baseline for Wes Anderson for me. Like anything that I have below it are movies that I still respect, but I just don't enjoy watching as much. Um, and anything above it are movies that I could watch and rewatch over and over and over again. I just love them. I think I really enjoyed how refreshing it was to see Bottle Rocket. It was the first time I actually watched it was for this. Um, and I really enjoyed seeing how his style before it's become kind of a joke now, because like I mean when SNL is doing like a sketch parodying your style, I feel like that's when you know you've made it big, but also when you know like your style is like kind of like a cement stone now. And for better or worse, I feel like Wes Anderson is a very stylistic director, but like it's not all in this movie, so he has to depend on other things to kind of carry the movie. And so I feel like there's a lot more realism in Bottle Rocket. I like how all the crime is like just really hectic and silly, and like most of it goes wrong, which is like I feel like what crime probably mostly is like in real life is just like people wanting to do something bad but messing up. I like there's a moment where he says, where his brother says, "Why do you have that tape on your nose?" And then Owen Wilson just says, "Exactly." It makes no sense, but like when you're in the movie, you're like, "What?" It tells you a lot about the character. I also feel like watching it, maybe the movie's about like communication, because like Dignan and Anthony, like the two brothers, they're constantly like half lying, half telling the truth to each other, and they're keeping like big secrets from each other. And Anthony's like best relationship halfway through the movie is with a woman who speaks mostly Spanish and very little English. And I feel like that says a lot about the character, but also about the movie. That shouldn't be like your strongest connection at that point, but it is. And then I also like the ending robbery. I feel like the robbery at the end is like so much fun. It's like chaos. I like how one of the characters, I wrote this down in my notes. Kumar doesn't understand where he is in the middle of the robbery, and then Applejack starts having a heart attack. You're like, this is going way off course. There's a smoke grenade. They put on their masks after they've already been seen and by the cameras, and then it's just like, oh yeah, Bob left, and there's a chase sequence. It's just like that whole final robbery is just like a ton of fun. So I feel like that's why I put it a little bit higher, is because I just had a lot of fun watching this movie. So yeah, I enjoy Bottle Rocket, but it's not his best.
Yeah, definitely. Kerri.
Yeah, and this one, to be fair, I did not rewatch this one for this ranking, so I don't remember it quite as well as I would like to. But I don't remember liking it particularly, and to me, it was kind of a more forgettable movie of Wes Anderson's. Yeah, I think I kind of agree with what you said, Chad. It does kind of seem like kind of a somewhat typical indie film, and Wes Anderson is still trying to find his style at that point. I think mostly, though, my biggest problem is I don't particularly like the characters, and not that you have to actually like characters to enjoy a movie. But I guess they're not as interesting to me as I want them to be, or I just keep getting very frustrated with them, and there's not really a release of that tension enough in the movie to keep me engaged. So I guess that's why I think I would definitely still rewatch this movie at some point, especially just to see if my thoughts about it from my first watch are like still hold up. But yeah, definitely not my favorite. It's my lowest ranked, but everything else, I other than this movie, I really like everything else a lot more.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, you gotta kind of at least find the characters engaging in order to like a movie. But I did have another thought. I think at the very end of Bottle Rocket, Dignan is like in jail, but like when his brother comes to visit him, he's like, talking about how to break out or something like
Yeah.
that, and he's like, "Just kidding," or something like that. Like, I'm not gonna do that, which I thought was pretty funny. All right, so now we're moving on to a different thing. Kerri, is there something else we can talk about? Royal Tenenbaums, I think.
Yeah, we can talk about the Royal Tenenbaums.
This is very, very strange because I know a lot of people who rank the Royal Tenenbaums very highly, and yet here we are. We have at least 3 people who have mentioned the Royal Tenenbaums pretty low, I guess, But for us, maybe not as low. Yeah, let's go ahead and throw it over to James to start on this one.
Yeah, all right. I had Royal Tenenbaums at number 9. It's definitely not like, again, all of these really aren't that bad. I think I liked the way that the stories like were told about the kids that they had. It throws in kind of like an interesting potential like love-ish scenario. He paints the pictures of her and that throughout the movie. So there's like it works in a little bit of, it's not like, I mean, they're adopted, the one is, so it's not like straight up incestual, but it's like
Yeah.
semi in a way. So it is on that. Interestingly enough, this is kind of where it gets where I like. I just like the way that the dialogue exchanges, like these movies, they're so like short and choppy at each other, but they're so concise. And I feel like this one is really where that kind of comes into play, like the most for me. And then like it kind of expands on it from his other movies after that. So this is one where like I definitely like the exchanges between them. And then he really finds like the sets and like the costume pieces really get. I think they get like not better, but more stylized from this like age at least. So the Royal Tenenbaums, I like other ones more, but this is really like where I kind of started like paying attention to like how he like really kind of finds himself as far as like the dialogue exchanges go and things like that. This one I liked a little more than some of his other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Totally. Charles.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited to talk about this movie because I really don't like it, but I also find it really interesting as like a movie. I feel like, Kerri, you said something really interesting about Bottle Rocket, and Chad, you kind of built on that about like how if like you don't like the characters, like everything fails. And for me, Royal Tenenbaums is that movie, but I understand the Bottle Rocket because like most of them are pretty bland, except for Applejack. I ride for Applejack. But in the Royal Tenenbaums, I feel like most of the characters I hate. So I feel like there's like, I think 3 big things I wanted to say about this movie. This was actually the first Wes Anderson movie I've ever seen, and I loved it the first time I saw it. And it's the movie that got me into Wes Anderson. But every single time I've watched it since then, I've like that Wes Anderson is really good at showing, not telling as a filmmaker, but this movie is mostly telling. Like most of the plot is shown through narration, like Alec Baldwin's narration, or they're told through letters, like characters' feelings done through letters and not the conversation at all. So it just feels expository,
Hey,
like
Charles.
most of the movie. Yeah.
I just want to, is Charles breaking up for everyone else, or is it just me?
Mm-hmm. It's breaking up a little bit.
I'm breaking up.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try again. I have Spotify on, so I'm gonna turn that off, and then maybe I have like a YouTube video that's been buffering. Maybe I'll delete that. Okay. Maybe we can try that. Where did I start breaking up? I'm sorry.
You seem fine. I'm trying to remember the exact like thing you were talking about. All I could think about was you're now he's breaking up. I remember you talking about the last thing I remember was maybe like you not liking the characters.
I think that's where it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I don't like the characters, and I feel like this movie's mostly tell don't show. Like a lot of the narration by Alec Baldwin carries this movie, or the letters, like big revelations are given through letters. And I miss characters having conversations, which I don't think happens enough in this movie. And the other 2 things I really don't like about this movie is I just really do not like Gene Hackman in this movie. I think he's not good, and I think that's a pretty hot take because I think he was nominated for an Oscar for this movie. So I'm sure that's a hot take, but I also don't like him as a person, so I think that might be influencing it. And I heard he was apparently horrendous on the set for this movie. He was abusive verbally, physically with people, and like I think you can tell, like in the movie, like just the tension that we seem to view as just a natural tension between this father that's just completely off in another world and trying to like spend time with his family even though he forgot about them. I think the tension is mostly that they're afraid of Hackman. And also, I don't like that the character is constantly racist towards Henry. It's just uncomfortable. It's not funny, and it's just like, I don't care that this guy has cancer. Bye. And then it also doesn't help that they treat like a dog as a prop at the end of the movie when the dog is just hit by a car, and then they're like, "Hey, I solved the problem. I just bought you a new dog." I'm like, this has Wes Anderson ever had a pet before? Like, that's not how you solve that issue. Is that like it's just one of those like those moments I literally skip. I whenever like Gene Hackman's being a racist, I just literally fast forward because I just don't care about that character. But here's one thing I do like, or a couple things. I like Danny Glover. I think Danny Glover is awesome in this movie, and he's probably the best thing in this movie. He just gets better and better, and I wish he was in more Wes Anderson movies. And I think Luke Wilson and Gwyneth Paltrow carry most of this movie as well. I think they're just really, really good in this movie, and they just absolutely carry like most of the drive and most of the characters that you care about because you do really grow to like feel for those two in particular. But overall, I feel like this could potentially be his worst movie. Sorry, that was a lot.
No, I never apologize. Kerri.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything you said, Charles. I like, because I said the characters from Bottle Rocket were not that engaging. I also feel the same way about this movie, especially like I think Gwyneth Paltrow's character and Luke Wilson's character and Angelica Houston's are like the most interesting, and Danny Glover's, but it's still not enough for me in this movie.
Yeah.
And basically everything you said, like the stuff with the dog, like just the unnecessary racism, like all of that to me contributes to making this movie like, I think I have this like my 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My 10th. So it's just not, I agree. It's not my favorite.
Yeah, so it's interesting because Charles told me about his thoughts about the dog at the end before we started this recording, and I was just like, "Oh my god, that's like my exact thoughts on the Royal Tenenbaums." Where I feel like a lot of people just love this movie, and yet, for me, when I watch it, I enjoy a lot about it. Like, I really like, I actually don't mind a lot of the characters. I definitely agree on Gene Hackman. And, it feels like one of those actors who just thinks he's above it all kind of a deal, and just comes in and just like, I guess trying to get his money. I don't know, all the backstory on that, but, I agree that it kind of shows through. But you do have a lot of other characters. I do like, the kind of imagery and the level of detail that he includes in this. It's like one of the first times that he is like so freaking detailed that you're just like, you really built like a real family. Like, this family really exists.
Oh yeah, that family tree we get to see that's like drawn out. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and just like the level of detail in the house, and just him like painting the picture of this family and the backstories of all of them, and the pressures that these like genius kids had, and growing up in like a broken family, and like you talked about, there's like ancestral stuff. The father's kind of a racist, and obviously doesn't give a shit about animals, and so like what happens if you grow up in this kind of family and you're already kind of like extremely smart? You're going to be very weird. And a lot of these characters are very strange, just wearing track suits. Like, the whole family's wearing track suits and like running out to do fire drills and stuff like that. It's
Ben Stiller's fun in this movie.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. But yeah, any enjoyments I have, I mean, I can't really say this movie has like a ton of enjoyment, because even the fun stuff is kind of undercut. Well, first I'll say, because I think the suicide stuff with Luke Wilson gets really deep, and I think that's a really interesting part of the movie. because I feel like Wes Anderson movies don't normally always get to like that level of kind of harrowing stuff and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like a lot of the interesting characters get undercut by something like with Owen Wilson's character. I like him where he's kind of like the outsider who wants to be a part of the family, kind of a deal. So, but he's crazy, and yet when he comes in and smashes the car into the dog, or he's done. I can't I can't like that character anymore. But still, he's still better than because he's like, I killed the dog, didn't I? But then Gene Hackman's the one who comes in and he's like, yeah, like I'll just get you a new dog, and it's like you're not a good grandpa. So don't do that. You gotta help them grieve and stuff like that. And the kids don't even really seem to care after they get the new dog. So I just don't think it's good writing because, like you said, anybody who's ever owned and loved a pet, they just don't. They understand, but the people who haven't, I guess, just don't. They think it's like a goldfish, and then no hate on goldfish. Treat them with respect too, but flush it, get a new one, kind of a deal. And it's not on that level with dogs and cats and things like that people just they're a part of the family. So anyways, I could go on about the cat stuff and dog stuff because animal stuff is hard in movies because especially as like a big horror fan, the way Charles said about treating an animal like background, like an object in the movie, or like something to show that something's going on. Like that's a whole horror trope where it's like, oh, the dog's dead, something's up, and it's not sad. Like it's not supposed to be sad in the movie. It's like a whole, thing. Like it just happens, and then you're supposed to just move on. But anyways, yeah, I could go on about that, but I think the Royal Tenenbaums is really interesting. It's where he kind of first found his footing in, going super crazy detailed. And I think that someone said it's to be respected, but you might still not enjoy it all that much. Yeah, so that's the Royal Tenenbaums. Kerri, is there anything else that we can talk about, or?
Yeah, we can talk about the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Three Others. Unless anyone, I'm sorry, I didn't ask this for the other two. It's not, none of these are a wait for it for anyone, right?
I don't think so.
Okay. Just wanted to double check. Okay. Yeah, we can talk about the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar.
Sounds good. All right. Charles, do you want to start with the Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and three more?
Yeah, sure. I kind of shared earlier that Asteroid City I've ranked later, and there's a reason why I'm kind of going to talk about that a little bit, but not too much. I feel like what I really like about this kind of short story cycle is it feels like it's kind of a callback to Rushmore and like the little theater vignettes they have where you kind of see kind of a whole theater play at the end, but there's also like little mini plays throughout the whole movie. And it felt like this is kind of what maybe he was trying to aim for with Asteroid City, where he was trying to also make a play, but in a movie. I really enjoyed the way they did it in this. I love the stop motion. There's always like a really cool use of stop motion in each of the stories, which is really cool. I like the photo cards and the stand-ins. The props were really cool too. Like some of the props were really ridiculous, and some of them like there were no props at all. Like sometimes they would make the use of like invisible space and have someone pretend to be carrying something. And I think it's just so cool. I don't know. It just it gives off these cool vibes of seeing these really famous actors like play with like pretend in that way. I also didn't read a lot of Roald Dahl when I was a kid, and so I was actually I think only a few poems from Where the Sidewalk Ends, but I was kind of surprised at how dark, depressing, and cruel a lot of these short stories are. Not in a bad way, but like just that most of the stories felt like it was dealing with how awful real life can be. And as like an English major that really loves writers like Flannery O'Connor that are obsessed with like Americana and like things being really just like dark and cruel, I really kind of was interested in it. But I also would be lying if I didn't say I really enjoyed the stories like the Henry Sugar one and the Poison one a lot more than the others. The others felt like they were just too cruel, too dark. I just didn't really understand the point or like the hope in it. It just felt like just more sad. Um, I think the constant narration would probably be someone's biggest obstacle to getting into these because like you have to be willing to basically have someone just constantly narrating at you. But like once you allow it to take over yourself, I think it really hits. Sometimes there's like some really good moments where they just have absolute silence, and that silence hits a lot harder because you're used to constant narration. And I also liked how each of them had distinct narrations and distinct voices. Um, there was a lot of great actors in this, but Cumberbatch, Patel, and Fiennes, Rafe Fiennes,
Mhm.
they were probably the ones I enjoyed the most. But yeah, I actually really like this movie, but the Ratcatcher one, I made it go way down, way down in my list. I did not enjoy that one. Sorry.
No worries. All right, Kerri.
Yeah, 100% agree with everything you just said, Charles. The Ratcatcher, like if that one had the Ratcatcher had not been in this group, this would have been a lot higher for me. I also didn't particularly like the Swan either, but the Ratcatcher one, and I know we like for time's sake and everything, and just these are so short to like have them all separate would be difficult, but I really loved the wonderful story of Henry Sugar. Like I thought, just and really how all the stories were filmed, like the mix between narration and like the actions and pretending stuff is there that's not. I thought was just so cool. But yeah, just the content. I think more of the Ratcatcher and even a little bit the Swan, just like really soured me on the entire anthology. So I would probably go back to Henry Sugar. I would maybe go back to Poison as well. I thought that was really well done and really interesting. I'd go back to those separately for sure, and I really enjoyed them. But the other two, and I'm not quite sure, like, because I think these were all part of an original collection of like 7 short stories. I'd be curious to know like why these 4 in particular were chosen over the rest. But yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I actually agree with you guys quite a bit. I had this at number 11, and it's not because I didn't like it. You know, like I find enjoyment in all of these movies, but I had this at 11 because it's pretty new. It's the newest one, other than Asteroid City, and I've already said that's lower for me as well, because I've only seen them like once. However, when I first watched the Henry Sugar one, I was like falling asleep, and then I was like, I don't know what the hell that was. Last place, and then I was like, you know what? I really need to actually give this a fair shake and watch this all the way through, and then watch the others. So Kerri and I, spent some time, watching just that one video that has all of them in like one, like back to back to back, and we would just like watch one and watch the other, and then just try to like get them done in good time. And when I rewatched Henry Sugar, I was surprised that I liked it a lot more the second time. I was like so impressed about like all of these actors. Like I think the only big actor that Charles left off was Ben Kingsley, that I think was also really great in it.
So good.
And I was just so impressed about. I mean, it just felt like like a stage play. Like
Yeah.
people, they're just on screen like most of the time, and they're just walking in this one room, and just the way that, and we'll talk about other movies later that Wes Anderson has done this with, but making great use of small space, just kind of like one room, 2 rooms, something like that. The camera doesn't go that far, and then might even just end up right back where it started. And yet so much has happened through the art of like just straight up storytelling, narration, like Charles was talking about. That is, it's what these movies are. And that could get, very tiring, or it could just be someone's, bag, like something that, like, I love this. For me, I'm somewhere in the middle where I think it's perfect that he split up different stories. He told the different, like, small stories from Doll in, smaller packages, so we can spend 40 minutes doing this, not 90 minutes to 2 hours of someone narrating in a room and stuff like that. Because honestly, if any of them were any longer than they were, it would get tiring quickly. And so I'm glad that they were the length that they were. I agree about the Swan and Ratcatcher, and just the animal stuff. It just really gets to me. Although I still think those are like super well done from like a storytelling perspective, and just like how the camera moves precisely to where it's supposed to be, and just like very, purposeful, and everyone knows exactly what they're doing. And, I don't know, it's just like so specific and precise. And, I just, Wes Anderson just like baffles me every time I'm just like watching something, and I'm just watching something unfold. And, it almost seems like they're doing it in one take. And I don't know if they did, but like, it's just so, cool how the performers were able to do it. And you have Benedict Cumberbatch like running off stage, putting on a different outfit, coming back on, and like, coming back as a woman or something like that. The comedy of that stuff. And the actors just doing this very seriously too, and just really crushing it. Yeah. So Henry Sugar rules. I really like that one a lot. And then the Poison, I think, was good. And then it kind of tapers off from there. But they are all worth watching, I think, just for the craft of it. But yeah, I have it at 11. Although if I go back through Wes Anderson at some point, I could see it actually getting higher, because I do think the stories are really interesting too, and just so impressive. All right. So James, you have to talk about it too.
Yeah, I had the shorts at number 8. So I liked all of these a lot, but I think what really kind of like pulled me in was really like how he handled like the condensed, run times, coupled with, like you guys have said, with like the narration, because it's a pretty big part of the feature length films. But to see it done like in such a short period of time, but done so well, still really speaks to like how, I think, just how well he's able to like manage this kind of stuff, and how much experience he's had over like the years and years with it. I think the shorts definitely show that he can like do that too. And I love how like choppy some of the scenes are. Like you guys said, it's one scene to the next. The camera knows where to go. Everyone knows what they're doing. I think I got the most of that from the Swan itself, but I do think I liked Henry Sugar a lot too. You guys said these were all at once on YouTube, because I watched these on Netflix like one at a time, kind of. I don't know if they're like
same. I did that too, James.
On Netflix. On Netflix, I think they might have them separate, but there is a video called The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Three More, and it's all of them in like one stream, like a 90-minute stream.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I mean, maybe that's why I put it higher, just because even like to like break it up from one to the other, even just finding them in Netflix, I think gives enough time to break up, like, allow her to process kind of what, happened in each of the shorts. But they were done really well. I liked them a lot, but there was just a bit, there's other movies I liked a lot more. That's all.
Totally. So yeah, let's see, Kerri, what should we do? Should we go to our 8s now?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. My eight is the Royal Tenenbaums. James, what is your 8?
My 8 is the shorts.
All right, Charles.
Bottle Rocket.
All right, Kerri.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. My 8 is the French Dispatch.
All right. Let's go on to our 7s, because I don't think we have a.
Yeah, the same one we already.
My 7 is The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. James.
Wait for that one.
Same.
Oh,
Number
nice.
7.
Nice,
My
nice.
number 7 is French Dispatch.
All right, Charles.
My number 7 is Isle of Dogs.
Okay, Kerri.
My number 7 is the Darjeeling Limited.
All right. Anything now that has 3?
The French Dispatch, as long as that's no one's waiting for it.
Nope.
All right, sounds good. Kerri, do you want to start with the French Dispatch?
Actually, could we just say our 7s one more time?
Yeah, I'll
Sure.
go around. My 7 is The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Oh, I got it. It was mine.
All right.
That I did not write down. Sorry.
Okay. All right, Kerri, do you want to start with the French Dispatch?
Yeah, I'll start with the French Dispatch. This is one we actually rewatched for this.
Oh, cool.
I think we saw it in theaters, Chad, right?
We did.
Yeah, so this was the first rewatch since we saw it in theaters, and I was glad I rewatched it because it like kind of helped solidify things in my mind. I think it was a really interesting movie. I like certain aspects of it, and this one's definitely like an anthology, of like I think it's 3 separate stories.
Yep, 3.
All owned by these are articles that were written for this newspaper, the French Dispatch. There's some of these I really like, and some aspects of some I really like. The one about the police chef, I think that's maybe my favorite one.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
And that kind of has a somewhat similar narration style to the wonderful story of Henry Sugar and 3 more. And I really like Jeffrey Wright in it. I think he's really fantastic. The other 2, I just didn't like them as much. I think my least favorite might have been the one with Timothée Chalamet and Frances McDormand. And that's right in the middle of the movie, and it's just hard for me to get through that one. So yeah, overall this is a little lower ranked for me, although because I still enjoy certain aspects of this movie, it's still a pretty solid watch, and I'd still put it on again.
Yeah, I mirror a lot of what Kerri said. I didn't really like this one that much when I saw it, in the theater, and I was like, wow, okay. I thought I would like every Wes Anderson movie. Rewatching it, I did like it a little more, but I still have it ranked as my lowest. I think it's just because, like Kerri said, like as much as I love Timothée Chalamet and Frances McDormand, I think that one right in the middle of the movie is just not really interesting. And I think my favorite is the one with the painter and what's God.
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio del Toro. Thank you. And
He's so fun in that.
And Leah Seydoux and all them.
Yeah.
But and Tony Revolori. I really like that one a lot. I think that might be my favorite. And then the third one with Kerri said Jeffrey Wright, I think is pretty good too. So I think it opens well and ends well, but in the middle, I'm not sure. So yeah, I think it's just a really messy movie. I'm also not like that big into like French culture, like no shade to the French, but it's not something that I typically like to watch. Maybe I need to catch up on some French cinema. I like the Umbrellas of Cherbourg, stuff like that. So I've seen, a fair share. Wait, is that French? Yeah, that's French, right?
Yeah.
So I like a little bit of French stuff, but I think in this, it just really wasn't ultimately my cup of tea. So yeah, it's my least one, even though I don't hate it, of course. I enjoy parts of it for sure. And I love how like the third one just kind of like ends up in like explosions and like gunfights and stuff like that. Another movie that probably will rank very high for a lot of us. that also turns into gun battle. A lot of these movies actually kind of do that
Yeah,
sometimes.
the way Wes Anderson does gunfights are just so much fun. Like I kind of wish he did a Bond movie just because to see a Bond sequence done like it would just be so wild.
Could you imagine just like symmetrical Bond and just walking straight in the middle of the frame just all the time, with everything just happening around him as he's walking. Yeah, yeah, I like it, but it's my lowest strength. James, French Dispatch.
A French Dispatch was pretty cool. I think I liked the overall style of it. I think I liked the aesthetic enough, I guess, more than everything below it. I think the three different stories was a cool idea. I think they were done well enough. I mean, I like Benicio del Toro. When I saw he was getting himself in an Anderson film, I was right there for it. So I knew it would be at least that good because I've seen him in pretty much anything. It was pretty like it had a pretty good feel to it overall. I do think the Francis McDormand, Timothy Chalamet bit was a little bit Harold and Maude, but I guess if that's what he wants to do, that's what he can do. I like how he includes kind of like different actors, like kind of one-off people in some of his films. I know he has his like core group that's in like the better part of them. But it's nice to see other people be like kind of like brought into these. So it's a cool concept overall, and I liked it, but I think it's going to be a thing with all these. I just liked it much more. That's all.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to add, piggyback of what James was saying about the family aspect of Wes Anderson is because it's kind of the same thing that I love for Mike Flanagan. If you're into horror and you like Mike Flanagan, he does kind of the same thing where it's like you have like your core group of actors that you've kind of started with, and so they have just followed and mostly have just been in all of their movies, and then they'll slowly just start adding more cast members, and they're not in every single movie, or most of them aren't in every single movie, but you'll see them pop up a lot. And I think that's really cool when you can build like a family of actors, and so who's probably going to be in the next Wes Anderson movie. Like Jason Schwartzman is like in I think all of them, if not just most of them.
Mhm.
So yeah, I like that James brought that up because it is really fun to see who's going to be who in the next Wes Anderson movie. But yeah, Charles, wait, did you talk about it? No, you didn't.
Yeah, no, I actually really enjoyed the French Dispatch. I went into it kind of worried a little bit because, to be honest, like I think as you'll see in my personal rankings, I'd rank a lot of the most recent Wes Anderson stuff pretty far low compared to his like older stuff. So I was a little worried, but I actually did enjoy this movie. But I do think, like you have all said, the second story just really hurts this movie. I think this kind of start with the things I really like. I really like the soundtrack by Alexander Desplat, I think.
Mhm. Yep.
I really enjoy his music most in most movies. I was a little peeved one year when he won Best Soundtrack over, I think, Trent Reznor for something. I can't remember what it was. It was an Oscar bait movie. But his soundtracks are normally on point, and especially for Wes Anderson movies. And this one is just really beautiful. I love how each segment had its own themes that would just like play throughout. I think my favorite story, although I really like the police sergeant one or the police commissioner one, my favorite story is probably Concrete Masterpiece. I think it's just so I think it's just so interesting and creative. It's like very wholesome, but it's also complicated. It seems like a commentary on the prison system, but also a commentary in how we view, consume, create, and sell art. Like who is this art owned by? Is it owned by the prison that we made the art out of? Is the art owned by the artist? Is the art owned by the muse that inspired the artist? Or is the art owned by the person that paid the artist to make the art? It's just like bounces throughout, and there never really settles on an answer. And I think that's what's kind of cool about this story. Um, and the police commissioner one is just like, I feel like classic Wes Anderson. If you watch that one immediately after watching Bottle Rocket, like it would fit because like it's super wacky. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's mostly hijinks. But Jeffrey Wright is so amazing, and I honestly hope he becomes a consistent part of Wes Anderson movies moving forward, because I think like just he's just so good in that. And I'm pretty sure he's in the French or not Asteroid City as well. But like I think he's perfect. I hope he continually getting cast in Wes Anderson movies. The things I wanted to say about the Timothy Chalamet story, I think you've covered a lot of it, but I think this is why I have the movie farther down on the list, is because I think he was making this movie to show love for journalism and to show like to support how important journalism is, but to like show some nostalgia for like the classic newspaper magazine, like the days when that was really important, especially when everything's on the internet now. But like that second story, I think really hurts the overall like message of the movie, because this journalist in the second part is awful. Frances McDormand's character is breaking journalistic ethics like left and right. She sleeps with her subject, who is far younger than her, and writes a story about him that ends up having an impact on this social movement. But she slept with him, and then she went and protested with him. And these are things like, as a journalist, like, why are you a journalist if you're going to do these things? I'd rather you be a fiction writer or a nonfiction writer instead of a journalist, if that makes any sense. Like, it just, when that story happened, I was just like, okay, I just don't like this journalist is just breaking journalism 101. Why do I care about her story anymore? So I feel like, honestly, that newspaper would have lasted far longer if they had fired that journalist and hired someone new. But I like Frances McDormand, so I'm kind of struggling. But yeah, good movie, but really weak second. Maybe French Dispatch could work if they put Henry Sugar in there and like add a journalist. Maybe French Dispatch ends up being really great then.
There you go. And to confirm, Jeffrey Wright was in Asteroid City, so we'll see. Maybe he'll keep it up.
I hope he does.
But Kerri, is there anything we can talk about, or are we moving on to our sixes?
We're moving on.
All right. So my 6 is the Darjeeling Limited. James, what is your 6?
I had Asteroid City, number 6.
Charles.
My number 6, French Dispatch.
Kerri.
My number 6 is Moonrise Kingdom.
All right. Sounds good. So is there anything that we can talk about now?
Unless it's in anyone's wait for it, I think we can talk about Asteroid City.
All right. Sounds good.
Cool.
No one spoke up, so I'll go ahead and start with Asteroid City. I didn't get a chance to rewatch this, but I did see it for the first time. I don't know, like it is kind of strange. Like I think Charles mentioned about how it's kind of like how the shorts are, where it's like a lot of narration and stuff like that, because it's someone like going through their play that they wrote, and then we get to see the play acted out in movie form. And I like the setting. I mean, Wes Anderson, one of his biggest strengths is his set design, and how he doesn't win set design every year. He comes out with a movie. I don't know, but he should.
I didn't know that. That's wild, actually. Not
What?
even for Grand Budapest. He never won set
I
design.
don't think he did. I don't think he
What?
won the art direction for that.
Dang.
I could fact check that soon, but
That's crazy.
yeah, I don't think he has. An Asteroid City, like, look, I know Barbie looked really great, or whatever one that, or Oppenheimer looked really great as far as the set design. But like Asteroid City, he built the town, dude. Like, I guess they did in Oppenheimer too, but I don't know. I feel like it's always more impressive when Wes Anderson does it, because it's just so well made and detailed and everything. Like, I talked about with the Royal Tenenbaums and just the detail in the house and all of the sets and stuff, and how he figures out where the camera is going to go and stuff like that. It's just so good. I think that's one of the big strengths of Asteroid City. I actually like how this came out in the same year that Oppenheimer did, because not very similar in types of movies, but very similar in like the focus on out in the desert and the atomic bomb and stuff. But this one has aliens. So this one's maybe a little bit more fun. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting. I didn't really vibe with the the in the movie and then the outside of the movie stuff, and I just maybe kind of wished it was just the inside the movie stuff. And I thought a lot of that was really interesting about them just coming to this convention and the alien coming down and taking the meteor and all the stuff that came with that. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I just don't think it's like that good of a story
Hmm.
that I really like cared about all that much. Although I could give it a rewatch and you know maybe, but it's one where you can always enjoy something from a Wes Anderson movie because of the way he makes them and the the beauty of his sets and stuff like that. So that's my highlight is the set design. But yeah, I do owe it a second rewatch. Although I still put it at 10, so it's not my lowest, but it's towards the bottom for now. But it could go up. I don't know. James, Asteroid City.
Yeah, Asteroid City I liked so much, but I think mostly it's simply because I personally just like the overall aesthetic of like the overall like southwestern just like landscape. So when you get those like desert mountain kind of like background combinations, I don't know, probably because we don't get enough of it here, and I like to think of myself as kind of an outdoorsman, so I haven't like been out towards that part of like the country to kind of experience like the outdoors like that. But when you put it up on the screen in the way that he did, just like the way that kind of like the colors popped and like the overall just the concept itself was really cool. I know I think a lot of this list of mine was kind of realizing which kind of like aesthetic I kind of like the most, even if like the story might not be that great, if the story to other people was good. I think there's just a certain like pop to this movie that the other ones below it just kind of didn't have. And this one was one of his more recent ones, but there's a lot other with like better, I think, storylines in this one, kind of like what you said, Chad. But to me, like I just liked the landscape shots, just the overall like just the way it looked, the way it like I don't know, it was cool. I liked it a lot. That's all. I guess I just like the I like the overall like aesthetic of this one more than anything else.
Yeah, totally. Charles.
Um, yeah, Asteroid City. I had this as my last. There was only a few things I really enjoyed about this movie. I feel like maybe Anderson is kind of like in his homage like era. Like he's just doing like certain movies or short stories that are focused on like themes or like hobbies, like French Dispatch journalism. He did the short story collection on Roald Dahl, and then this one about the theater and filmmaking. It's just interesting. But I think French Dispatch works a teeny bit better than this one. Um, I feel like for me, the playwright and like movie making aspect of this is like too buried for me to really appreciate. But I guess before I get too much into my negatives, the things I do like about this movie are I really enjoy the soundtrack. I talked about Desplat on his last on French Dispatch. He's really good in that. He's really good in this. The soundtrack is very minimalistic. It's not like used during most of the movie, but like the ones it does, it sounds really cool. Like they have this like weird song that plays when the alien arrives. It's like I don't. I'm butchering this. I'm absolutely butchering this. But they have a great song that plays, trust me, when the alien arrives. And I really enjoy that. And in general, the alien scenes were my favorite part in this movie. I love like the goofiness of the stop motion. I like how you see a guy in a full alien costume later on. It's just super cool. What I didn't like about it is I didn't really understand what the movie was about. And if I don't understand what is happening in the movie or what the purpose is, I either like try to do research and try to figure it out, or I just like don't care enough, and then I'm just like, well, I didn't get it. And this one, I didn't really care enough to do a lot of research on it. So like I finished it and I was just like, I just don't really see the point. I don't know what the movie was about. I don't know, yeah, like what he was trying to say. So maybe it'll improve if I rewatch it again, but for me, I just didn't get a lot out of it.
Yeah, totally. And it does look like for best production design, I do. Wait a second. Okay, so here's the thing: Grand Budapest Hotel did win best production design, but Wes Anderson wasn't the credited designer, so he still has only won one production, or no, sorry, one Academy Award, and that was for The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. I know that was like a huge deal
Interesting.
for that. But yeah, Grand Budapest Hotel did win production design, but I
Oh,
don't
cool.
think anything else has. And there's a lot of great stuff in this slate that has great design. So yeah, Kerri, did you talk about Asteroid City?
Not yet.
Okay.
So I think I had this the highest ranked of everyone, and not too much higher. Had it at my number 5. But I really, really enjoyed this movie. Like James said, I really liked the aesthetic, both from like all different levels. Like I like the kind of Southwest aesthetic, but also like the like UFO extraterrestrial aesthetic, like that's in there, and then just the way the set design is, like the elements that are like a play, but then for so much of the movie you feel like you're actually set in the Southwest. I don't know. I thought the characters in this are really interesting. A lot of, I feel like Wes Anderson characters tend to be kind of dislikable people. And I think this movie has a lot more characters that are conventionally likable. I think part of that is because you have these multiple layers of characters. You know, you have the characters in the play, and then you have also the characters of the actors who are playing the people in the play. So I feel like that was really interesting. And I think there is some top-notch acting from like Scarlett Johansson, from Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, that's true.
That scene between Adrian Brody and Margot Robbie, where they're like standing outside in the alley, like on, I think they're on like opposing balconies. Like I thought that was an incredible scene. Yeah. So overall, and this kind of for me like a movie that's kind of a little bit more relaxing to watch. Like a lot of Wes Anderson's movies are like very high tension. Like the characters are like sometimes really frantic or manic, and like, you know, are a lot like in Bottle Rocket or in Darjeeling Limited, like lying to each other. And there's a lot of stressful situations going on. And this movie, I feel like, especially because it is framed as a play, is almost a little bit more relaxed. So just for me personally, this kind of just fits my taste a little bit more.
I mean, that's definitely a good point about like the vibes of the
100%.
movies, where like, you know, Royal Tenenbaums has more of a sad, dark vibe to it, and yet Asteroid City is just kind of light and fun, and you know, hey,
Yeah.
an alien might show up. That's wacky and crazy. So yeah, I definitely agree. It does have those vibes, so I definitely enjoyed that.
Yeah, you
So-
made a good point with that, Kerri, for sure.
yeah. All right. So we're moving to our fives.
Yeah.
Okay. So my number 5 is wait. Did we said 6s already?
Yes.
Okay. So my 5 is Moonrise Kingdom. We're in our top 5s, by the way. But this is exciting. James, what is your 5?
My 5 was also Moonrise Kingdom.
Nice. Charles.
Cool. My 5 is Life Aquatic.
Okay.
Wait
Kerri.
for it.
My 5 is Asteroid City.
All right. Anything we could talk about? Are we going
Talk
to
about Moonrise Kingdom for sure.
Moonrise Kingdom? That's not a wait for anyone. All right.
We all said it now.
Sounds good. James, you want to start with Moonrise Kingdom?
Yeah, Moonrise Kingdom is one of those where, like, as much as I've talked about like the aesthetic that these movies have and how like flashy some of them are, I just like the way that, again, this is more like an acting and a storyline one that kind of was like I thought was really good. I know the whole like underage like romance thing gets handled kind of like delicately sometimes, and I think it was done well enough here, but I think like Edward Norton did such a good job in this movie. I mean, I kind of like seeing one that features like kind of like a scout, group. That was kind of cool to me. I this one, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this really, but I think it's definitely one of the better storylines that I kind of liked. I think the whole like camp aspect was really cool too, and really I think it's just why it kind of like beats Asteroid City and those beneath it. This one was more like the stories that I kind of vibe with more than anything else. That's why this was number 5.
Hmm.
Totally, Charles.
Yeah, Moonrise Kingdom. I think I've talked to you a little bit about my feelings about this movie with you, Chad and James. I think it may be with you too, Kerri. But Moonrise Kingdom is like the first. I was like, Rushmore made me like a rabid Wes Anderson movie where I watched every single movie besides Bottle Rocket because I just had a tough time finding Bottle Rocket. Um, and then Moonrise Kingdom, I was so pumped. The cast was stacked. Bruce Willis is in this movie. Oh my gosh, this is going to be my favorite. And it may be have been because of such high expectations, but like I was so disappointed with this movie. But like I can acknowledge that like most people love this movie. I think this is the movie that like turned Wes Anderson from like a really cool like indie filmmaker that has some bangers to like no, he can make Hollywood movies too. Like he can make like this, that's not necessarily big budget, but like Oscar winners. Like I feel like this was the first one that really put him in like an Oscar conversation, like continuously for every movie he would make. But there's some. I guess I'll talk about the things I really like first because I do like some things about this movie. I feel like he does such a good job of capturing what it's like to be a kid in this movie. But in particular, like that transition from when you're a kid to where you're still a kid, but you would like to be an adult. And it's like a really like weird like 2 or 3 years, and this movie captures it. But it also I feel like it captures kids growing up on the spectrum. I don't think it's necessarily ever textual, but subtextual. I do wonder if like the two main characters are on the spectrum, because they are in different ways. When we see what their lives are like before they're together, they're ostracized in different ways, and they act and react differently to situations other than people their own age. They're just, I guess, to put come up with a different word, weird. They're more weird than you would think, but we don't, because it never tells us that they're on the spectrum. I don't want to automatically assume, but I do feel like it does a good job of capturing it. You're growing up, but also like you're just so different from everybody else. You find that other person that you just lock with. I think it just does a wonderful job of capturing that. The kids either can't get along or feel like they don't belong in their current family, so they escape. And it totally makes sense. This whole movie makes sense from a kid's perspective. And I think that's where it's strongest, is when we're with the kids. For me, I feel like the other thing I really like about this movie is I like his editing in this movie. There's a really great scene where the adults are reading all of the letters exchanged between the two kids, and the way it's edited is so good. It's like each moment that you're getting to each moment in the letter, they're cutting to the kids doing that, and then cutting back to the adults, and then cutting back, and you're just realizing like that these kids have been talking for a while and planning this for a long time. It's just a cool moment. The finale is a really fun set piece, but for me, this is where the movie kind of struggles for me, is that I feel like the kids' story resolves by the end, but the adults, I feel like, don't really change too much, and their plot lines aren't really neatly resolved or feel resolved by the end. And so I guess what I mean by that is the ending, while it's a fun set piece where everybody's kind of pitching in, it doesn't really feel like everything necessarily gets resolved. There is some positive change that hinted at. Bruce Willis, I think, adopts the boy. I think that's really cool. And so they continue dating and having like a romance, but the affair is still up in the air. That's not really resolved. The parents are still micromanaging, and they're using a bullhorn to make announcements, which they were doing in the beginning. And so it feels like, oh yeah, Tilda and Jason Schwartzman are only in like 2 scenes, but they have like a pretty lengthy sequence in each moment. So it just feels like the adults aren't necessarily given a lot to do, and I feel like I don't really feel as invested, honestly, in a lot of them. And part of me kind of almost wishes the movie was mostly just the kids. But I don't know if that would be the same movie. So I know that was a lot, but I really feel like for me, like there's just always a disconnect for me when I see this movie.
Totally, Kerri.
Yeah, this is one we didn't get to rewatch, but it is one I really remembered liking. I think for some of the reasons that James talks about, like just the camp aesthetic, like the idea of kind of that childhood dream to run away from your real life with a friend and then like actually going and doing it. It's kind of just like a little bit of wish fulfillment. And I think the child actors in this are just like absolutely phenomenal.
So good.
Their characters are so interesting. They're just like their own little people. Like I think they're just like fascinating in this movie. So that's a lot of why I like this movie. I just really enjoy watching the characters in this. I think overall it's a solid story. I feel like because of I guess kind of a lot of the outdoor atmosphere, this one feels a little less like something about it is like a little less breaks a little bit. I feel like of Wes Anderson's, sometimes his style can just be like so like blocky and color coordinated. And I feel like this is a little bit of his later films. This is a little looser about that. I think that's just like an interesting aspect of this movie. But overall, yeah, it's one I do like to rewatch. So
No, I mean I think that's a good point. Is I also really like to rewatch this one, and I think it's because like I totally hear where Charles is coming from, and I think it's because I don't really focus on the adults as much, but like they do have a lot of screen time, so it's not like just them looking for the kids, and then the kids are like the main big thing. Although when the kids are on screen, those are like my favorite parts because of that the main kid I really really like because I
Yeah.
like how they set up the camp thing, and then everyone's looking for him, and it turns out
Oh,
he's so good at being a scout that like
it's so good. He like John Wicks them.
yeah, basically, and like they don't know where the hell he is. He's prepared for everything. Um, and the way he's like goes up and like sees this girl that he likes and goes into the dressing room to talk to her. Like he's so smooth, and I'm like, he doesn't look like a kid that would be like that smooth. And then he just walks in. It's like, what kind of bird are you?
They should make a Wes Anderson like pickup line book where it's just like those are the pickup lines and it's just like 100 of them. It would be bizarre. I don't think any of them
Very
would work.
very. Yeah, and I like all the like like little kind of rivalries within like the scouts and stuff, and like no one really likes this kid, but he's like the best of all of them, and yet he feels so ostracized. And then like the moment when they find out that the kid is an orphan, and yet the orphanage is like, yeah, we don't want him to come back here. And they're like, what do we do? Like, what do we do now? This is we weren't expecting this to So I love Wes Anderson humor because it's just, I don't know why it always feels like it's unexpected, but it's just kind of a different kind of humor. It's just like situational stuff, and so like when it happens, it feels like it creeps up on you, and then it's the funniest thing you've ever seen. Not because, like, I think mostly because Wes Anderson movies aren't normally seen as comedies, and so when you have a lot of like specific stuff happening and drama happening, and then you have like a movie that's actually kind of refreshingly funny, it definitely works. So yeah, Moonrise Kingdom has a lot of that stuff in it, a lot of the kid stuff. I mean, it's just a really good, I think, coming of age movie. And I liked the chemistry between the two young kids in the movie.
Mhm.
And I think there's like one scene like where they just start dancing and stuff, and it's just, I don't know, like those parts in movies I really dig. And yeah, it's a joy. I have it in my top 5. It's my number 5. So All right. So, Kerri, are we moving to our fours?
Yeah.
All right. So we're moving to fours. My four is the Isle of Dogs. James.
I had a Darjeeling Limited.
Charles.
I have Darjeeling Limited as well.
Kerri.
I have the Grand Budapest Hotel.
That's a wait for it for
Wait
me.
for it.
So wait for it. Yeah.
The only one we have not said.
Yeah.
That's true. Actually,
Agreed.
yeah.
I think I'm really excited to see what our list is because it's really interesting. Like we all do have very different opinions on like our favorite styles, but like our least favorite are kind of relatively the same.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think I can see some that are still going to rank highly, even if there
Mhm.
may be one or two people who are like, I have that one a little bit lower.
Yeah.
I didn't think we were going to kind of mostly agree on the Royal Tenenbaums. I think someone was going to have that crazy high, and no one does. So, all right. So, Kara, is there anything we can talk about now?
Yeah, we can talk about the Darjeeling Limited. Sorry, I keep tripping over
Oh,
that.
Sound-
Everything else is a wait for it. So
Sounds good. All right. The Darjeeling Limited. Charles.
oh, so I have a really soft spot for this movie. It's not in my top three, but I feel like this is my vibes movie that I like to put on, and that I really enjoy the vibes. I know that seems strange because of the child death in the last like before the third act. So I know that that's not very a vibes
It
moment,
was an
but like
Maybe just not that part.
but like everything else is just like very I find it restorative in a lot of ways, and I do agree that the characters are mostly um, assholes in this movie, but I do feel like we genuinely see like tremendous growth from them by the end of the movie, and I think that growth in the characters is what I really wanted for like other movies that I had lower on the list. I just feel like it didn't have the same growth from them, where I was like, oh my god, they've almost transformed. I really like how in Darjeeling Limited the camera movements are a little bit slower and the editing is a little bit slower. It's not as frantic. It's like more patient. Like sometimes entire scenes just take place inside like a carriage of a train, and that's kind of it for like 15 to 20 minutes. And I kind of really like that. It makes it feel more intimate. I also feel this movie is probably the slowest out of all of his movies, but I actually think it's done with like a purpose. I feel like the movie is trying to mimic the sense of meditation, where like it kind of lulls you. Like over time, it starts really hectic with like the Bill Murray chase sequence, and then it goes into just kind of it starts lulling you into just kind of like neutral area, and then you have a moment where you wake up with the child tragedy that happens, and then the rest of it is extremely healing. I feel like it feels like a spiritual sequel to Bottle Rocket, where it's like a grounded, but like it's mostly just focused on one family, brothers, and they are hyperbolic. They all have their quirks, but their like hate or in love for each other is really grounded and realistic. I think it mimics a lot of real family relationships. I think my favorite scenes is when the brothers are trying to rescue the two boys crossing the river. It comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting it. It's not built up at all, but like it completely takes over the movie. And I feel like it does a good job of mimicking that. Like we may not be prepared for these big moments. We're not expecting these big moments, but how we show up in these moments really defines who we are as people and as brothers. And in that moment of tragedy, the brothers come together, rescue one of the boys, and one of the boys do pass away, but like they stay for the funeral. They become involved with the village. Like it is such like a powerful sequence, and it's extremely moving. I think the editing of the sequence is like amazing. If I taught like film school, I would like show that scene over and over again. It does a great job of showing the tragedy of a child dying without showing the child dying, and I think that is super underrated. I really like how it just cuts to Schwartzman just frantically sprinting and Adrian Brody just carrying the boy, just like, and he's just like pale and he's just saying he's dead, he's dead. It's just like the whole sequence is amazing. Um, I feel like the last thing, this kind of ends with like a question, but if you don't have an answer to it, I totally understand it, because like it's kind of a weird thing. But I feel like this movie's kind of a metaphor in its own way, where it's like, it's, if you watch it as a surface level story, it's a really peaceful and heartwarming story. Brothers go on a quest to reunite with their mom, they overcome their grief for their father. But like on a metaphorical level, I was wondering if the train like represented something greater, because like there's this moment towards the end of the movie where like the train is passing by and we're seeing all of the different characters we've seen in the movie, and they're just inhabiting these different carriages. It doesn't even make a lot of sense logically for all of them to be in that one train, but it just happens at the end of the movie because maybe it's trying to be a metaphor more. And I was wondering if like it was trying to say that like all of these characters, they're all like in a hospital bed or they're in a hospital room, or they're all on an airplane traveling, or something. Like, I just am always fascinated with what the ending of that movie is, like showing all of them on the same train and what that means. I don't know if y'all had any ideas whether that was just a stylistic flourish or not, but I've always been interested in this movie and I really enjoy it.
Totally. Kerri.
Yeah, I've never thought about that before. And because I was watching, when we were watching the movie, I was thinking about it. Because I was like, they're not like all really actually on this train. Like, we've seen these characters at different. And I was thinking about what that meant. And that brings up a really good point, Charles. I'd have to think through that a lot more.
Yeah.
Maybe really...
maybe it's just the Lynch movies I've watched that have made me like, it's not really about this. It's about this.
I really like this one. It is my 7th, but that's kind of the start of, in my Wes Anderson ranking, of his movies that I really truly just like absolutely enjoy. So I really love this one. I always start it and I'm like, why do I like this movie? These characters are jerks. There's so much going on. But then they do, like you guys said, they go through so much growth, and like you come to realize why they are the way they are. And I think it just like, it turns into this really beautiful like journey between these 3 brothers. And like that when they're chasing the train and they like let go of all the, like they literally let go of all their baggage.
Yeah.
It is such a great movie, and it is really just a 7 on my list, because when I was doing this ranking, this was the one that, of my favorites of Wes Anderson's, was the one that just was last of my favorites. But I really do love this movie.
Yeah, totally. And I remember when Kerri and I have watched this a couple times together, and like this last time, you know, we both were just like, they're letting go all of their baggage, literally. This is really really awesome. Yeah, I mean, this is such a brisk movie. It's like 90 minutes, and so much happens. But this is one of the ones that I always highlight when I just think about how impressive the production design in these movies are. It's just like how they were able to literally like make this set in a real train.
Oh yeah.
And just like film on the train. And it's like you hear about stories about like, you know, like Home Alone wasn't actually filmed in a house. Like they built that house set inside of like a gymnasium, because in like a real house, like how are you going to get like a whole film crew in there and stuff like that? So to see them like do this on a train, and you know, all the actors are just like perfect. I just think it's, you know, it's something to behold. And I feel like this movie's like ranked low for a lot of people. Like it feels like a lot of the times like this movie's not really talked about as much as like, you know, the other ones, and like it's such high esteem. But every time I watch it, I'm like, this one's actually really good. I really like this one. I like the story of the brothers, and I like how, I think Charles or someone said they have a lot of quirks to them, and how you know, you come into the story and, you know, Owen Wilson's face is all bandaged up, and you're like, what the happened to this guy? And then he tells the story, and then for me, I'm like, I don't even know if he's lying about this. And then like towards the end of the movie, you get to see his face, and you're like, nope, wasn't lying, and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like it's like a spiritual healing journey, and of course, it's going to be set in India because of that. I like the part when they go to get the car, like their dad's car, and it's like the stories that they would tell, and like trying to figure out who he liked more, and them all like figuring out if they like each other, and trying to one up each other and stuff, and some of them aren't even talking to each other at one point, and then they fight at one point, which is it's pretty funny. And then the car sequence when they're trying to get that, I think, is really cool, because they're the stubbornness and of not wanting to let something go, and things like that. So I can totally see that, because I'm like a very sentimental person, and I have a lot of trouble letting things go. So to see a bunch of people, like a group of brothers, like mend, like heal, like Charles was saying, and mend ties, and let go of stuff that just really doesn't matter, and like just to heal and be better for the future. And for me, a lot of the times I'm just like, I would love to just let things go and just get freer because of that, let go of so much weight on you. And this one should be talked about a lot more, I think, because I do like it quite a bit, and it's just outside of my top 5. But I think it's because there's so many great Wes Anderson movies, and we've been talking about a lot of the ones we haven't liked that much. So now we're about to talk about the ones we kind of love. So, and this is, I think, is one of the first ones.
I wanted to say real quick, Chad, that like I feel like it captures like the vibes of like when you go on a vacation and you finally like escape and you disconnect from your real life. You can like focus on yourself, and like you could be like, oh yeah, that stuff doesn't really matter as much anymore. Or, this is what life is all about. It just like it captures that vibe really well. You did a good job talking about that letting go theme.
I mean, that's every time I go on a vacation, that's the whole thing, is because you're breaking out of your routine at home, and you're getting a new, fresh perspective from a different place. And so you can kind of like look at your life and how you're living it like at home, because you get like kind of like sunk into this, way of doing things, and then going out, maybe seeing how other people do stuff and whatnot, just, thinking about, when I get back home, I'm gonna start doing this. Whether you do it or not, I don't know, but you can kind of recontextualize your whole life. So you're right, yeah. A vacation movie definitely can do that. So yeah, James, you didn't talk about this yet, right?
Yeah, Darjeeling Limited, number 4 on my list. I think this really does blend the best parts of the vibe and the aesthetic, and the story aspect of this, which I mean you guys have already talked on so much of, because I think there's just so much to really discuss about this movie too. I mean, I like the concept of it being the train ride across like the Indian countryside. I think it's really cool that it takes place inside the train for like a good bit of it. The scenes they're drawn out and they're long, like a lot of times in these other ones, with how flashy and good they are, you get like the scene in this room and this room and this room, and then you kind of jumps around. But I like the way this one kind of like maintains the overall scene for as long as it does. And yeah, I was pretty surprised too when they have to deal with the kid dying all of a sudden. It's a huge, but I think it's still done so well that it made me like this movie so much. It's just a great blend of his film style and storytelling. I definitely like this movie a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. All right. Oh, and I forgot to say, there is one part in this movie that I really find interesting, is the very beginning, before you meet any of the characters, you just see Bill Murray.
Yeah.
And he's running to make the train.
Yeah.
He doesn't make it, but
No.
come running past him is Adrian Brody.
I
the train, because it's just funny because you think, Darjeeling Limited, okay, this is going to be a Bill Murray movie, or at least he's going to be a big part of it. No, he's only in that scene. He doesn't make the train. He's not in the
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah, that's why it makes me think like the train is like an extended metaphor, because like the story I feel like the movie would have shown us Bill Murray's story if he made it to the train, but it just so happens that Adrian Brody's character makes it, so we follow them. It's such a strange beginning.
Maybe down the road, Wes Anderson will tell us that story, and that'll just be a
Maybe.
different movie.
Maybe.
That's what I would do if I were him. Anyways, yeah. So Kerri, are we moving on to our top three?
Yeah.
All right. So now we're gonna list out our threes. My number 3 is a movie I adore, Fantastic Mr. Fox. James, what is your 3?
Mine is also Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Charles.
Fantastic Mr. Fox is my number 3.
Wow. Kerri.
My number 3 is The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou.
Nice. Okay, Kerri, can we talk about something? No, we're now in 3.
About the Fantastic Mr.
Life
Fox.
Aquatic.
No.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
I guess we can also talk about Life Aquatic. It is in someone's top 2, but now that we're in our top 3, we can talk
Is
about
Isle of Dogs in our top 2 as well?
It's in my top 2.
Oh, okay,
Makes sense.
gotcha.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go ahead and do Life Aquatic first, and then we'll do Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. All right. Life Aquatic. Kerri, you start.
Okay. This is one we rewatched for this ranking. I am so glad we did, because the first time I watched it, I did not really like this movie that much. It was actually, I had like kind of a draft of my ranking before we rewatched anything. And this was, I think, second to last.
Wow.
And we rewatched it, and now it's my number 3. And I almost put it like, I think my top 3 could really be interchangeable at any time. I don't know. Like, something about this movie just really, really hit for me in our recent watch. Like, I just love the aesthetic of it. It's like this really early use of what Wes Anderson would go on to do on like bigger scales and like Asteroid City, of these like weird little set pieces, and they're like the fishes and stuff are all fake and the submarines like all fake, but it works. It's so cool, and you're kind of like, oh, that's a good way to kind of get around like, not having like this crazy insane budget, like just as a stylistic choice. I don't know, something about the characters like and the things they go through, and Owen Wilson's character, I think just the overall, I don't know how to describe it. Like the vibes of the story hit for me. Like I thought this movie was like so devastating by the end, but also so filled with hope. Just like, and maybe I've realized that if a movie has an ending I like, I will like forget all its other faults. And not that I think this movie has a lot of faults, but I think the ending to this movie is just so hopeful. And the way this group of kind of misfits comes together, and they're still just going out and going to do what they're going to do. But I feel like they have this like renewed sense of purpose, and they have this greater bond. I think this movie is also just really fun. There's so many crazy things that happen in it, and just goes on and on. I don't know. It's hard to explain because, so I've criticized some of these other movies for having really unlikable characters, and I think like Bill Murray's character in particular is really unlikable. I think Owen Wilson's character isn't that likable, but I think it is more about the journey that the characters go on and how they relate to each other. I just love, by the end, the scenes with Bill Murray and Owen Wilson, like how they really form this like father-son relationship, and it's like very questionable. whether there is actually a father-son relationship, but they form that type of relationship, and it's like what each other needs at that moment in their lives. And yeah.
Yeah,
Really
definitely.
rambling, sorry.
No,
that was great.
definitely. That's what I do when I talk about a movie I love as well. But yeah, before I get into discussion on Life Aquatic myself, here's this.
Wait, I forgot. I also, the music in this is my favorite music of any Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I was gonna start off my thing by saying I think the music is the best part of the movie. I anytime everyone here is a Sigur Rós fan. I think I said that right, Charles?
Mhm.
Sigur Rós fan, and anytime they play a movie plays a song by that band, I just kind of fall in love with it. But yeah, just all of the music of this is incredible. Honestly, I do think this movie is very like all over the place. Like there's so much happening all the time, but I don't think that's necessarily like a negative. I think it can be at times where there's, I feel like it's going on like a little too long. Kind of like where I think like the Darjeeling Limited is very, brief and brisk. I feel like this one does go on a little long at times, but honestly, there's just a lot of fun to be had in it. A lot of really funny stuff. I think Bill Murray is a really funny lead. I like the touching story between father and son with him and Owen Wilson. And then it's devastating what happens to Owen Wilson towards the end, and even the sad bit with the dog that doesn't get to come with them, and it's like so long, the dog. And,
Isn't the dog like the reason like they like got screwed over? Like they got caught or something?
I think so, yeah. But
yeah.
but yeah, just the style of it is so cool, and the idea of like the filmmakers who are like living on a boat and the architecture of the boat and the the design, the way it's laid out is just so cool, and and then this also has a big gunfight and stuff that happens at one point when the pirates take over. It's just so I don't know. It's just a really interesting movie, and it's one that I do like more and more each time I watch it. But also, I find myself kind of, I don't know if it's like a pacing issue or kind of what it is with it, but I do think this one does kind of go on too long sometimes. But then in other times, I'm really enjoying it. So I have this one like right in the middle of the pack. I have it at number 7. And the only reason it doesn't squeak into the top 5 is because there's so many others that I really like. So but this one is pretty excellent. Yep. James.
Yeah, I had Life Aquatic at number 2 because I absolutely love this movie, and it was my number 1 for the longest time. This one was a bit better, but oh my god, I love so much about this movie. I think the way it kind of like transitions from like just some straight up, assumed revenge story to everything that goes on in between. I think obviously at the end he finds the jaguar shark finally, and he decides not to kill it, but like kind of because he's out of dynamite at the time too, but also because of it's like he just likes the beauty of it, and he's like, I think the line was like, does it even like know who I am or like remember me from way back when? But I think it's like kind of a touching moment brought into the end, and obviously paired with that Sigur Rós song. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for when the soundtrack just blends so perfectly in with a scene, or just like it matches kind of the aesthetic or whatever. But this movie's great overall. I like the camera shots, like between like when they're off the ship versus on, like you get that kind of like scene switch between like the rooms in the ship, and then it's more like contiguous per se, like when they're off of it, like on the islands or on land and things like that. Willem Dafoe is fantastic in this movie. I love Willem Dafoe and everything Anderson, but he's just so great in this one too. This has been my favorite for a long time, and it definitely still is.
Yeah, like there's that one part with Willem Dafoe where it's like, what about me? Like, don't you like me?
So
It's really great. Yeah. Charles, did you talk about this yet?
No.
Go ahead.
I love this movie. I have it at my number 5. For a while, it was probably higher. Um, I think I feel like I guess let me pull up my notes. There's so many things I could say about this, but I think the first thing is that at first when I saw this, I think I was in high school when I saw this, and the first time I saw it, I remember really being really upset by the ending of this movie. Not necessarily like the last like 8 minutes, but Owen Wilson's death. It like really like his character's death like threw me for a loop. And it made me really frustrated with the movie. But each time I've seen this movie since then, and I think I've seen it like 7 times, the movie's gotten better and better, and the ending I've felt better and better about Owen Wilson's character dying. And I guess to talk about the things I really like, because there's a lot I really like about this movie. The stop motion for the sea creatures is really beautiful, and it makes the ending really just like hit. I love how creative they are, and I love how like all of the fish and like animals are just not real. That like gives it an aura of just like coolness to it. Um, I feel like my favorite creature effect is probably the crab mating ritual we see at the Sisu base. It's just like just doesn't make any sense, but like it's so cool. I think there's a lot of great one shots in this movie where the camera's just following them for like minutes. I think the miniature life size tour of the boat was so cool. Steve fighting off the pirates on the boat nearly single handedly like always makes me lose my goddamn mind. Like I'm always laughing or I'm always just like, get him, because it's just like so goofy but like badass. You're just seeing him run around in his underwear with his like gun. It's just so cool. And I was just like, I don't think he would technically win that fight, but he somehow does, just 'cause he just runs at him and they're just like, wow. um, I think Bill Murray is amazing in this movie, but I think I'm with you, Kerri, on that. I think this is Owen Wilson's best performance out of all the Wes Anderson movies. He's so good in this movie, and like he plays a really understated character. Like it's not a very emotional and like crazy character, but it's a very peaceful character. It's someone that like he plays like a character that has learned a lot more about life than his father has, and he has this wisdom with him that he seems older than he actually is, which makes his death like far more tragic, I feel like. And I think it's why this movie really is just amazing and really just has an impact on people after you see it, because you really care about that father son dynamic. You really care for Owen Wilson's character, and when he dies, it's like still shocking every single time I see them get in that plane. I'm like, just don't get on the plane. I mean, don't get in the helicopter. Just like don't. There's no reason. They have a conversation even about like how the copter needs to be updated, like way early in the movie. It's just like it reminds you that like death isn't necessarily something that like is always feels right. It's most of the time is random and it feels just strange and sudden and shocking, and it really captures that really well. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say is that I feel like the music, I think everybody's really covered how good the music is here. But the music really just does a lot of heavy lifting in terms of just making this movie just fun to watch. Um, and I guess the last thing is I think the only reason why I don't have this movie higher is just that it can sometimes be a painful watch, and that like I think the way it deals with father son relationships and also grief is very real and I think poignant, but it can make it a difficult movie to watch, honestly, sometimes, just because I connect with a lot of those themes myself. But honestly, like, I totally get it when people say, like, Life Aquatic's my favorite movie. I'm like, I totally get it. It sometimes is my favorite movie, too.
Yeah, isn't there also that part when the jellyfish are everywhere?
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah.
Doesn't he like start to like say like a fact about him, and he's just wrong, and then
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. See, that's the thing too. Is like Steve Zissou. He doesn't actually like have like he's not the smartest person on the boat. He's not the strongest. He's not the most organized. He's not the nicest. He's like the least in every category. It's just he has a really great team, and he's like absolutely insane. And like, but like honestly, like most of what he says is just BS, which is honestly I think more real. I feel like that's what probably a lot of like if you watched Animal Planet, like I bet like most of those hosts were not like as expert as they really were. The team behind them were,
Yeah,
except for Steve Irwin.
yeah, and then the reporter shows up, and then she's like, "Yeah, no one picked me up, so I had to get a
Yeah,
boat. Yeah, I had to get a ride here."
Kate Blanchett's really fun in this movie too.
Yeah.
She's great.
For sure. All right. Everyone talked about that one. Yes, Kerri started. So, Kerri, now we're on to we're talking about Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Mhm.
All right. I'll go ahead and start with this one. But first,
What are you singing, Petey? You wrote a bad song, Petey.
I love that. So good. You wrote a bad song.
yeah, so Fantastic Mr. Fox. I love this one. I'm a sucker just for like stop motion animation. Kerri knows I love Aardman movies, so like Shaun the Sheep and Wallace and Gromit,
Oh
and
yeah.
Run, all those things. Gotta do an Aardman ranking at some point. So Wes Anderson making a stop motion is just so cool. It's like very like Tim Burton, Henry Selick of him to do, and just really really cool. Especially because we found out with this movie that his style lends perfectly to stop motion animation, or maybe even just animation in general. But I love that every time he makes an animated movie, it's stop motion, because I do think it's a really cool form, and also because stop motion takes so much time and effort to do, and precision and detail in it, that I think that's why Wes Anderson probably really likes it, because he likes to take that time and setting the detail of a movie and just making it like so like thoughtful. Yeah, I don't know. I like the story of this. I like the fox that wants to be a fox and wants to go out and like sow his wild roots and do the crazy stuff like a wild fox would do. But then he's married and has kids and has to settle down and get a regular job and stuff like that. But he still wants to go out. It's kind of like the Incredibles. He's like, I'm gonna go out and do this on the side or something like that and stuff. And then the adventure that they get into, the jealousy that his son has for his cousin, who's like really cool and like cooler than him in like every way. And yeah, it's like I like the three like villains who are just like we just saw one where they're just assholes and they're just big capitalism, like corporate farmers or whatever, and their biggest enemy is this dang fox. And so it's just a whole journey. I love the there's like that whole scene with the God, what is that, like a rat who
William Dafoe's character, the rat.
yeah, that's right. It's really great. And I like the ending. I think this is one of the best endings of them, hitting like just a major food supply and and just dancing in this supermarket. It's the best dancing in a supermarket ending. And then you got White Noise that did another great dancing in a supermarket ending as well. If you haven't seen that, check it out. At least check out that ending. And yeah, just like the style of the characters, I love the flow of it, and it just really is just one of his best movies easily. And I wish I had watched it more recently, so I could pull more like facts about it and stuff. But I think it's just the journey that they go on and the adventure aspect of it, and trying to just be able to live their lives in safety, and also the growth that these characters have as well, and not being jealous over your cousin, and not taking, I guess, your family for granted, and stuff like that. So and realizing that there is badassery and coolness in taking care of your family, and things like that. So yeah, this movie rules. James.
Yeah, this is another excellent movie, fantastic for lack of their term, movie from him. I love the stop motion too. Every time I start this up and I see it's Aardman, I'm like, oh, like I always forget it's Aardman. I'm like, oh, that's right, yeah, like another one of these. It's so good. I do love the stop motion too. I think like George Clooney works so well as like a voice actor in this. Like just the way his voice, like I don't want to say like boring necessarily, but like just how like monotone it can be, and just the delivery of it is. I think it's just done so well for Mr. Fox, and I think I like the way that like he portrays like the farmers, all like the way they try so hard to like actually like get Mr. Fox to stop, but there's another like kind of underlying story really where it's like maybe from the farmer's perspective, it's like don't get too hung up on like revenge, because ultimately they just kind of like perpetuated Mr. Fox's actions. They acknowledged it, so they kind of like almost permitted it to keep happening. So he kind of like had that continued purpose through their hatred of him necessarily. But I think that one voice in there I always forget is Michael Gambon, so that's always a good voice acting bit from him. I like that a lot. This movie is great overall. I know we haven't talked about the other stop motion movie, but you could say, well, before I saw Isle of Dogs, you could say the stop motion here walk so that Isle of Dogs could run, but I don't see it that way, man. I like this movie a lot more, and it's probably actually one of the more rewatchable ones too. It's a really good take on an older, funny enough, Roald Dahl story. So I see like kind of why maybe he wanted to revisit that with the shorts. But this is an awesome movie. I like it so much.
Totally. Charles.
Yep, I really love this movie. This is one of my favorites. I think I had this at number 3. So I really like Fantastic Mr. Fox. I agree with you, Chad, about the ending. I think one of my favorite parts of the ending, it's not like right at the end, but it's towards the end where Mr. Fox runs into the wolf and you see it like really far away. It's just like so beautiful. It's like so good. It's like it does a good job of like illustrating how stop motion can sometimes be like really goofy, but it can be really beautiful at times too. And that's like one of those moments that really hit. I also really like that most of Wes Anderson's movies are actually pretty like rated R, like they're pretty like mature, like and like kind of pushing the boundaries in a lot of ways. But like he really sticks to like making this a children's movie. Like you can show this to a kid and it works. It's I think a great children's movie, and it's a classic children's movie. Like there are definitely some adult jokes in there, but like they're hidden. And if you watch old children's movies, there's a ton of little adult jokes sprinkled in too. I think this is like if I was gonna get like if I had a kid and I was gonna get them into Wes Anderson, I would probably show this movie first because it's just a fun story. And I also want to echo what you said, James, about George Clooney. He's one of my favorite parts of this movie, and I really wish he was in more Wes Anderson movies because he's so good in this one as a voice actor. I would like to actually see him in a different Wes Anderson movie too because of how good he is in this. He has this earnestness to him that like his voice is so charming that like yes, even though like like Mr. Fox lies constantly, like you can understand why he gets away with it because it's George Clooney. It's just like I don't know. I really love this movie, and actually my wife Hannah, this is I think was her favorite when we did a rewatch. So she would have put it at number 1 if she was here.
Perfect. Kerri.
You guys all had this at number 3, and I had this at number 9.
Dang.
I don't know why. like in theory, I always really want to love this movie, and I think it is like an amazing movie. Um, but for some reason, I just wind up not really enjoying it that much. I think I just don't. I don't. I don't know. I can't explain it very well. And I think part of the harm in this is that this is one I didn't rewatch for this, or we rewatched it at the very beginning of our rewatches. And so at this point, I've just like forgotten some of it. But um, I think I just don't particularly love the story at the end of the day for some reason. I can't really explain why. I've read the book as well, and I don't particularly like the book either. I can't offer more than that. I recognize that objectively it's a really great movie, but for some reason it just doesn't hit with me.
If you don't like the story at the end of the day, maybe you should watch this at the beginning of the day. Just kidding. No, all right, so perfect. Now we're moving on to our twos, correct? Or is there something else we could talk about? No? Our twos. All right,
Whoa.
my two is the Grand Budapest Hotel. James.
My 2 was Life Aquatic.
Charles.
Rushmore.
Kerri.
Isle of Dogs.
All right. Anything we could talk about, Kerri?
Isle of Dogs. We can talk
Isle of Dogs. All right. And
They his next movie should be the Dogs of the Isle versus the Fantastic Mr. Foxes. He should go down the Godzilla King Kong route, man. Franchise this.
nailed it, James. Isle of Dogs.
Oh, Isle of Dogs. So as cool as this movie is, this was number 10 on my list just because there were so, again, there's a lot more that I think I appreciated more. Like, I definitely like the artistic style in this. Again, is so good. Again, voice actors I like so much. I think it's a cool concept of, going to, trash island or trash mountain or something like that. I think it's a cool, like, I like the artistic style when the dogs get in the fights is pretty cool. I think like the reveal towards the end it was kind of cool enough. I don't know if I like necessarily saw it coming or not. But that part was all right too. I think there was just other ones that I vibed with more, and I think not that he like wasted per se like the stop motion like effects on Fantastic Mr. Fox, but I think this one just didn't hit with me like the other ones did. That's why I just had this one down way lower on the list.
Totally, Charles.
Yeah, I think I didn't have it as low as you had it, James, but I had it kind of like towards the middle. I had it at number 7 for me. I did actually really enjoy this movie. This was another movie I went into with low expectations because I just kind of got turned off after Moonrise Kingdom. But then and then I got back on Grand Budapest, but then Isle of Dogs came out after I think 3 years or 4 years. But like there was a long gap, and I just kind of moved on. Anderson wasn't really one of my favorites anymore. I just kind of moved on, and I just never saw it when it was in theaters. So I saw it for the first time for this, and ended up really enjoying this movie. I think a couple favorite things is the soundtrack and audio mixing for this is probably like the highlight of the movie. I loved how they used UN translators for the government speeches, the official declarations, the meetings. It was just, I don't know. It was just like, it gave it this like cool feel. Like you weren't just like watching the story about this is my favorite thing about Wes Anderson. Usually is like, if you're watching a story, there's always like another layer to it. There's like another world that is being told within the story. There's like frame stories, etc. And I just loved the structure of that. I also liked how we got the Japanese dialogue without subtitles. I know there are some people that did not like that, but I will fight for that. Like, I like that. That's so cool because it puts us more in the dog's shoes. And I think that's just such a cool thing to do. Like, normally we see this movie told mostly from a kid's perspective, but it's told from the dogs. I think that's so cool. The soundtrack like reminds me of Akira. I don't know if you've ever seen Akira, but like the anime movie, the soundtrack is one of my favorite things about that movie. The drums, like that whole soundtrack is only percussion. And it seems like it's kind of like this for this one too. I think it was only percussion instruments that were used for the soundtrack, but it's so cool. I think my other favorite moment was the flashback sequence where we get to see Little Pilot meeting Spot for the first time. I thought that was so touching, and it does a good job of showing how important they are to each other. And I also like made me think that like it was kind of a similar thing to Bottle Rocket in a way that like Bottle Rocket, the closest relationship in that movie is between two people that don't speak each other's language. And the closest relationship in this movie is two people that can't speak each other's language but still understand what each other are saying. And I think I don't know. I'm a sucker for it. I think it's like interesting. There are some things I don't like about this movie, and this is why I don't have it in my top three. The structure of this movie is very strange, and maybe I'll understand it more if I rewatch it. But on first rewatch, I really enjoyed the first half of this movie because it was focused on the gang of the five dogs and them supporting Little Pilot and defending them against the other dogs. And I thought that was just such a cool kind of story. I was really involved in it, and I just was really invested. But then the second half, honestly, just completely shifts focus to Little Pilot, the young journalist that's trying to do the story, as well as the dogs Spot and Champ. It just kind of zooms in on those two dogs. And then the other dogs are just kind of background at that point, and they really aren't important to the story anymore. And so for me, like, it just kind of makes me feel a little bit disappointed in the second half more because it goes from like a really interesting ensemble movie, kind of like how Mr. Fox is the entire way. And then it just becomes more of a character study, I feel like, and it becomes really focused on a couple. But it's like a nitpick overall. I think it just meant that the end of the movie didn't hit as hard as the bridge confrontation in the middle of the movie.
Totally. Kerri.
Yeah, I had this the highest ranked. I think this was my number two. I just really love this story. I love the stop motion format. But for me, I think the difference here is I just love the story so much. Like, I don't know, like all of the, like, I love the story of the dog that starts off like human hating, but he comes to be like the little boy's like greatest protector. And I love, the reveal of Spots that he is actually alive and the boy reunites with his dog. And then, Atari is able to save the day by like appealing to his uncle with this haiku, and his uncle helps to save Atari's life. And I love like the happy ending of this movie. I love that the motivation behind all of like treating the dogs so horribly, which is like an awful part of this movie, but everything turns out like mostly okay in the end. But I love that the reason behind it is that like I think it's the mayor, but whoever like wanted this policy like loves cats so much. Like it's just like, I think it's just like a really funny, really cute thing. I think overall, like I like I said earlier, I love, a happy, hopeful ending. And this is, I think, probably one of the most like hopeful endings Wes Anderson has. I feel like it's one of the more conventional stories, but I kind of love that about it. But in some ways it's so unconventional, like the stop motion, like you were talking about, Charles, with not having the Japanese subtitles. Like there's so many unconventional, it's like an unconventional conventional story. And I really love it for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually did see this one in theaters, and then I rewatched it with Kerri, and I think like that second watch was what made me actually really kind of fall in love with this one, because Kerri and I both really enjoyed it that second time. I mean, it is kind of like a story about like prejudice, and let's ship all our dogs off to an island to cure disease, and really it's just like someone hates the dogs and stuff. But I do agree that I love the kind of, I don't know if it's like unconventional, but like the surprise where you want to see this little boy regroup with his lost dog Spot, and then you think Spot is dead because of the whole thing with the cage, and you know realize that a dog did actually die, which is really sad. But you know, when the boy meets Chief, they're not getting along and stuff. But then as you go along, and Chief wants to help the boy find his lost dog, I love how the relationship grows between them. And then when they finally do find Spot, you realize that Spot's not everything that they thought he would be, and that the real relationship is between the boy and Chief. And I forgot about that, and then when I rewatched this movie, I was like, oh my god, that's so like beautiful and kind of brilliant way of telling that story. I just love stop motion Wes Anderson. It just you know I vibe with it. You know, honestly, I would put this kind of on par with Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think they're just two very different stories. Fantastic Mr. Fox might be more like perfect, but this Isle of Dogs I think is like right up next to it. That's why I put it one at 3 and one at 4, because I think they complement each other as his two animated movies, and I think they're both very sweet in their own ways, and also very harrowing and stuff in other ways. But it just goes to show you, as much as we think Wes Anderson doesn't care about animals, hey, as long as he can make the main characters in his animated movies, that's when he starts to care about animals, I guess. Because, you know, Kerri, who loves dogs, ended up, you know, it's one of her favorite movies now. So it seems so. Yeah, I think Isle of Dogs is actually pretty underrated, and it rules. So there you go. James already spoke about Isle of Dogs, so now we're gonna go on to talk about something else. Kerri, we're going on to ones. We got two we haven't talked about, right? Right.
Yep. And we can go on to our ones and then talk about those two movies.
All right, sounds good. My number one is Rushmore. James.
Grand Budapest Hotel.
Charles.
Grand Budapest.
Kerri.
Rushmore.
Yeah, nice. Okay,
That's cool. I'm fine with it. It makes sense.
I like how it's like split. Okay, so which one are we talking about first, Kerri?
Rushmore.
We're gonna talk about Rushmore 1st.
Mhm.
All right. So first, this.
Why do you think you're right about Rushmore?
Sharp little guy. He's one of the worst students we've got.
Yeah. So who talked? James started last. So Charles, do you want to start with Rushmore?
Yes, I would love to. Okay, so my relationship with this movie, I think it's for the longest time, it was my favorite movie. Honestly, like depending on the day, it becomes my favorite Wes Anderson movie. If it wasn't for Grand Budapest, I think it would be my favorite. I think the movie's perfect. Every single time I watch it, it gets better. I notice more. And I think for me, the reason why I love this movie so much is we would actually watch it at McDaniel College once a year. I was part of Film Club, which was like this very small kind of club where like we would even watch the Oscars and like make bets and like fill out like predictions as to who would win. We were very geeky about movies, but I liked it. And every year we would have a showing of Rushmore. And Rushmore is just kind of like the perfect indie movie. And like that line in particular that you just played, like every single time we'd watch it, that would always get the biggest laugh because it's so good. Like Brian Cox's delivery, he's the worst student in the class. And you're just like, what? And then I think right after that, we get the montage of all of his clubs, or it's like right before. But like the montage,
Right after, yeah.
The montage is just so good. Like Rushmore is just such a good movie to watch with other people too, because it just has so many sight gags. I feel like Rushmore, honestly, when I think of like comedies like Arrested Development, I feel like Rushmore is like movies that inspired shows like that. Like just like really deep characters that have like legitimate things going on, but like are so funny to watch interact with each other. So many things to say that I like about it. The soundtrack is so good. The classic 60s, 70s, 80s rock songs are so good, especially the punk songs that they add. Bill Murray and Jason Schwartzman are amazing in this movie, and I think everybody feels that when they watch it. And it's really interesting historically because I think this was Jason Schwartzman's first movie, but like it's the one that made him big. But also, this was the movie that like made Bill Murray have another renaissance. Like, I think after this, he did Lost in Translation. And, like, I don't know, like, his whole career just blew up again. So, like, it's because this movie's just so good and both of them are so good in it. I think Schwartzman is probably, if I had to, like, rank them, he would be a little bit higher. But just, like, they're so good. They're perfect. I also think this movie's, like, really sweet and heartwarming, but it's really complex. The relationships between the characters are super gray, and I like that. I like that it's difficult to figure out who's doing what for what reasons. Herman is trying to find his passion again. Miss Cross is mourning the passing of her partner. Max is trying to like find a community for his future. And all three of those stories come to a really satisfying close. I think out of all of the endings, this is my favorite Wes Anderson ending of all time. There's just something beautiful about it ending with like the theater play, and the like it's just so stupid. The place like at the same time so stupid but also so smart. It's like it's exactly what like a college or high school play should feel like. Like it felt like when I saw Rocky Horror at McDaniel, where I was just like, this is both so stupid but also so much fun and so good. um and I also think the needle drop at the end, I think it's wish that I knew what I know now.
Ooh La La by Faces. Yeah.
Best needle drop in the history of movies. Like
Yep.
it goes up against anything. Like when it hits and then the slow motion happens, you're just like, yes, let's go. Honestly, this movie is just so good, and I kind of like. I honestly wouldn't mind if he made another movie in this kind of like realm again. But yeah, love this movie.
Totally. And Charles, yeah, you used to do a lot of Oscar stuff. That's what I do now. So we need to start doing this together. So anyway,
Yeah. I was doing Oscar predictions, I feel like every single year of college, and then for some reason when I became a teacher I just fell out of that. But for a while I was deep in it.
all right. Well, you'll get back into it. I'll make it happen. Kerri.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my number one. I just really love this movie. I think I agree with everything you said, Charles. Like every time I watch it, it's just still so hilarious, but also so like eye-opening. There's new things to find every time. Um, it it's really nice because there's definitely a Wes Anderson style to it, but it's not like so stylized like some of his later movies where sometimes it almost can feel like there's like style over substance, or like it's hard to you're very aware you're watching a Wes Anderson movie. It kind of takes you out of the story a bit. This just flows so naturally and these characters just feel like such real people. Like you feel like you've definitely met like Jason Schwartzman's character in particular, and the acting's phenomenal. Like you guys said, the music, or like Charles is the only one who's talked. Like Charles said, the music is absolutely incredible. And it is really just an amazing, amazing movie to just throw on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I put this as my number one as well. As soon as I said, let's do a Wes Anderson ranking, I knew this was going to be my number one just because, like, I think it was the first Wes Anderson movie I watched and was like, whoa. And if it wasn't, it was the one that when I watched it, I said, whoa. And I was like, it's just weird because it's like, there's so many movies of his that just feels like a Wes Anderson movie. And that's a compliment, but then it's also like, I can see why most of his movies like don't get like a Best Picture nom, and then when I watch Rushmore, I'm like, it's weird that this didn't get a Best Picture nom because I'm like, this movie is incredible. I think it's the best movie he ever made. Although I do think Grand Budapest rivals it. That's why it would be like a 1A, 1B type situation, because I think that's another impeccably made movie. But this one I just connect with more with like the characters, the stories. I agree with Charles. That needle drop at the end always gets me. I love it to death, and I'm just like, yeah, I want to pump my fist at it too, just because it's so perfectly crafted. I love the character of Max and how he, you know, at one point he like breaks down and he's like, no, I'm a barber's son. And it's kind of like, he's just really like upset about, seeing that as like a low thing when it's like his dad just loves like what he does.
His dad's great. Like you meet his dad and you're just like, his dad's awesome.
He's just chill, man. Like he's just like, yeah, do what you want, Max. I'll support you. Kind of a deal. It's like one of the best movie dads. I agree.
Imagine having a dad where like you fail out of like your classes like so many years in a row, and your dad just like, "Hey Max, keep doing you, man. Love you, man."
Love you, dude. And I like how that also kind of shows where it's like Max wants so badly to be accepted by this like Ivy League, like school where like people probably go on to Ivy League colleges and become rich and stuff like that because they're like rich kids. But with him, he's on there on scholarship and he can't maintain that because he's so busy doing all these clubs and stuff like that. And he's just not really good at the actual academic stuff, but he's really good at socializing and starting things up. And it's like, I'm going to start this new club that's going to, accomplish this. I'm going to build an aquarium at the school. And like how he sets all that stuff up, he's like the best businessman in the world. And yet he's so young and, it's just so cool to see him like how he does all of this stuff and makes impressions on people. He's like, feels like he's like an old soul in a young person's body. And that's why he like gets like trapped in this whole love triangle between him, Miss Cross, and Bill Murray's character. And then to see Bill Murray's character be lost and how he doesn't connect with his family. He doesn't like his sons. They're who they are. And then, Miss Cross, she's, heartbroken and, has tragedy in her life. So a lot of these characters who just like are trying to, figure life out, I guess. And then they, their conversations they have and all that stuff, I think is just truly great. And you see, because you get a lot of these movies where you have like a younger person pining over like an older person, and here it like, I think it's a really interesting story. It doesn't like go too far or anything. Like it's not like a licorice pizza type of deal or anything like that. But it is a really interesting part of the movie. And then, but I do also, like Charles mentioned, the plays I think are so like fascinating. How it ends up being, just like the most like well-crafted play that you've ever seen. And you're just like, how the hell did he accomplish this? This is like you're watching a war movie on stage. And it's like, it's almost like Max Fisher is Wes Anderson and how he can like craft these excellent, set pieces on like just a small stage. Mm-hmm. And, it's like you're watching Apocalypse Now in your high school auditorium. And you're like,
every single time when the helicopter goes over the stage, I always laugh. I'm just like, and then I think it cuts to the audience and the parents are like,
it's like explosions and stuff. Yeah, and like even like all the characters are kind of have their moments. Like even like the bully who's kind of a piece of shit is going around, and then Max is like, you want to be in my play? He's like, I always wanted to be in one of your fucking plays. So, like so many great moments in this. I don't know. this is easily not even just one of like my favorite Wes Anderson movie, just one of my favorite movies just in general.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would say that for many of actual like Wes Anderson movies. I think my top three I might say that with, but when I say Rushmore, I like actually really mean it. Like that one, like if you know, I put it as my number one. If I had to get rid of every Wes Anderson to keep one, it would be Rushmore easily. Although Grand Budapest is definitely a great second for sure for me. But so many more things I could probably say, but I'll move on. James, Rushmore.
Yeah, this one again, it's so good. There's a lot of just like acting that's so good in this. Like Jason Schwartzman, like you guys say, just does a great job throughout. You can tell like off the bat, like he likes being involved in the first school he's in. You know, there's that club montage, and he can't. You know, he doesn't stay, and then he goes right to the next school. And I think it just shows like his kind of like overall passion towards like just the academic programs themselves and how he can like immerse themselves in them. I like that a lot. I do agree with like Chad with what you said, like the whole like you know, like in your, you know, grade school teacher. They didn't take it that far with this one. It wasn't really that big a deal. Like I think it was done really well. I think Anderson knows how to like handle those kind of topics in his movies. And I think as good as this one was, I guess I just didn't vibe with it as much as other folks did. I had this one number 11, but I guess I had seen too much of his other stuff to have like an overall, it's just kind of like an impression of what like I feel like a movie should like his movie like should kind of play out. And as much as I liked like all like the acting bits, like Brian Cox does such a good job. Everyone like does a great job acting. It's just I guess this one didn't just speak to me like it did to you guys. But again, I watched this one pretty late. I didn't really find much of his like early to late or his late '90s, early 2000s stuff till like I was a good bit older. So I just didn't like I didn't really look for this much of stuff like when it came out. And I never really gravitated to like movies like this. So I see how it's good. I understand why people like it so much. And I just kind of don't. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
You're on mute, Chad.
Chad, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Totally. And Charles already talked about this, so now we can move on to the Grand Budapest Hotel. And Kerri, no, I'll start with it because Kerri looks busy. Yeah, the Grand Budapest Hotel, I think, is actually pretty excellent. Recently go over to the Dill Pickle Movie Network, where I co-host a show called Picture This. With my buddy Dylan Randazza.
Oh, yeah, it was nominated for Best Picture.
It was, yes. And so we recently covered the 2014 Best Picture slate because we're on a journey in that show.
That's a good year.
Yeah, to cover all of the Best Picture nominees like ever. And so we did 2014, and the Grand Budapest Hotel was in there. Also, Birdman, which is the one that won, was one I wanted to shout out because Charles was talking about, I think, Isle of Dogs when he talked about using like percussion in the score.
Oh, yeah.
Birdman has like a constant like drum percussion kind of score, which is really cool. But yeah, the Grand Budapest Hotel. I'll spoil it here. It ranked pretty highly between me and Dylan, and it's one that he didn't like the first time he saw it, but then like he watched it years later, and then was like, "What was I thinking?" He was like, "This movie is just like so expertly crafted to where like I think it makes sense why Rushmore would be my one and this would be my two." And then if I didn't feel so strongly about Rushmore, I could easily see it being flipped. Because this one is so perfectly crafted, is that Rushmore is the one that it has some Wes Anderson vibes to it, like when it's cutting to all the different extracurricular clubs and stuff, but it also just feels like an indie movie that you would normally see. And it's not extra like how Wes Anderson likes to be, where he's so extra. Where Grand Budapest Hotel is like totally Wes Anderson. And it's like him on full force, and just like I think everything in this movie is so expertly done. Like the set design, the acting. I mean, you got Ray Fiennes just killing it in this. Tony Revolori is so good in it. All the other side people. I love Adrian Brody in this. He's such an asshole. just like when he's like throwing out like slurs and stuff like that. and he can do it in this movie because he's an asshole. But it's like everything he says is just so funny, and I'm just like, the comedy in this movie I think rules. Oh yeah, by the way, I have something for that. The comedy.
She's been murdered. And you think I did it?
The comedy in the Grand Budapest Hotel, I think, is like one of the best parts. Like, this movie totally flows. The pacing is incredible. I love comedy bits, like, Ray Fiennes running in the hotel, and then from when he first finds out that he's in trouble. The Adrian Brody, like I said, and then also like the big prison break sequence, I think is like so incredible that I'm just like, how, like, he moves the camera and stuff like that. But then you also get like, some deep stuff between Ray Fiennes and Tony Revolori's character, and you also have oh god, F. Murray Abraham, like later.
Yes, yeah.
And then you also have one of those big shootouts. Like,
they're shooting across the hotel like at each other. No one seems to be dying either. Like, it's just wild.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. It's just incredible. I love the part when Willem Dafoe like has Ray Fiennes, like, he's about to kill him and then just gets pushed off the cliff, and just everything, just like the pacing, it just moves so quickly, but not too quickly, and it's just. But then when it stops, it's for something really important, and I don't know. This movie's just so beautiful, and just the color in it, and just. I don't know. It's just kind of perfect, to be honest. And it's weird that it's not my number one, but I explained why Rushmore is. But it's a solid number two, and I don't see it moving anytime soon. James.
Yeah, I love Grand Budapest Hotel. I mean, this is to me, the penultimate combination of storytelling and aesthetics. And I knew, just off the get go as I was watching, I was like, this is probably going to be my favorite one for some time now. It has been. I think it will be for a while. I love the way the hotel looks. I like the way they have all the rooms in it. I like the elevators, just everything about how they set up the hotel itself was really cool. I mean, I like Ray Fiennes. I liked Adrian Brody, and this was so good. You get a little bit of Harvey Keitel in the prison, which was kind of cool, like a bit of a smaller scene from him. So I kind of like that again, throw in kind of random actors here and there into his movies is so good. I like the snow chase scene. The train scenes are so good when he's trying to prevent from getting ripped out train or beat up and whatnot. And I mentioned they do, but those scenes were really good. I liked just the style of it was so great throughout. I love he gets left the boy with Apple picture and they go to steal it. And that's, part of what Adrian Brody's all pissed off about too, but it's just so good throughout. I loved every bit of this, and I have ever since. I'll call this out for the rewatchability of it. I usually do that with these rankings. I can rewatch the Grand Budapest Hotel as many times as I can. I love this movie through and through.
Oh yeah, because of that pacing and stuff, I think it is easily one of the most rewatchable movies. James reminded me of that part. Just how manic this movie is just when he's like, guard the boy with Apple picture with your life. Second thought, let's sell it. It's just like they're just going from one thing to the next so quick, but it's great. Charles.
Yeah, I love this movie. I feel like I actually predicted this movie was going to win Best Picture when it came out, because I was really still following the Oscars pretty heavily at that time, and I was really disappointed to see that it lost. And for me, I feel like this is my favorite Wes Anderson movie because it feels, whereas Rushmore is just so perfect, it's also rough, but that's also why it's perfect. It's just, I don't know, it's an indie movie. Grand Budapest feels like it's the perfect movie that Wes Anderson can make today, with being able to cast whoever the F he wants in his movies, or to be able to have whatever budget he wants, or spend however much time making miniatures. I love this movie so much, and I think it's probably, as time goes on, like this movie is going to be considered like definitely, I honestly think one of the best movies ever made. Everything about it is so good. I think my favorite things are, I always start with the music, but the music's really good here. I don't know if Desplat won best soundtrack for this movie. I think he might have, but it's so good. There are like some extended montage sequences that are mostly silent with just his music, and they're so good. Um, Y'all mentioned the jail sequence that has as is mostly Desplat music, but also like when you have that really long montage of the Society of the Crossed Keys, it's so cool. Like that whole like secret club all the hotel people have with each other. It reminded me of Series of Unfortunate Events a little bit, and I just love that whole montage about how like, hey, for like 8 minutes you're going to learn about this secret club. Um, I think this is probably Anderson's best written story as well. It's so easy to cheer for these characters. Everybody feels real. Everybody has really fleshed out motivations, and the ending just hits you really hard. The frame story is so great too. I think the frame story with F. Murray Abraham and Jude Law helps this story feel like it's more than just a story. It's something that's being passed on from generation to generation. Like this Grand Budapest Hotel is going to become almost like a fable for people. It's almost going to be like a lesson in life for people in the future, with the way that Jude Law himself is being inspired by the story. I love the sequence when the guy during the jailbreak jumps down and fights all those cops 1v5. And the way it happens is he just like puts the knife in his hand and he goes, and then jumps down. He kills all of them, and he dies. And then
He also
everybody
dies.
jumps down, and then they're just like, we call that a draw. And I'm just like, no, what? I'm just like, and like whenever that happens, I always feel like saluting, because it's just like the guy just no hesitation went in and died for his bros. I really like the poetry recitation motif in the movie. Whenever something crazy is about to happen, Ray finds this character, starts like quoting some scripture or poetry or like myth, and then he gets interrupted every single time before he finishes it, and like something crazy happens. I was trying to figure out why that, like what that motif meant, and like I came up with two possible explanations, but I'm not sure. But the first one is like maybe he's trying to say that like art is constantly changing in significance depending on the time in history. Or maybe he's trying to say that because he's saying this art and it's constantly being interrupted, maybe he's saying that like art is what we get like love of life out of, but like real life is constantly interrupting and constantly ruining it. I don't know, but either way, I really love that motif. And Ray Fiennes is really wonderful in this movie. I think it's his best Wes Anderson movie role, even though he's good in all of the others that he's been in as well. But he helps Gustav feel like he's the best at what he does for his time. But he also feels like someone that also was born way too early. Like if he feels like someone, if he existed in today's world, he would be thriving. He would be flourishing. Things would be perfect. He would be more accepted. I think there's a subtext of queer love and just queerness in this movie, and it's like it makes it honestly an extremely sad movie about queerness in its own way. But I think Wes Anderson manages to tell this story about how sad his life is, but also was able to show how he's made it uplifting in its own way. And the way he goes out is just like, it's extremely sad how he passes, but it also feels just like Owen Wilson's death. It feels random, but it also feels right for the character. It feels right for that story, and it feels like it punctuates. It really does a good job of punching through that. Like this is this bright individual's life that like changed everybody's lives around him for the better, and he's just snuffed out because of racism and Nazis.
Yeah, totally. Fact check. You were right. And Alexandre Desplat did win for the Grand Budapest Hotel for
Cool,
Best Original
deserved.
Score, and he was battling himself because he also did the score for The Imitation Game. Kerri,
Dang.
the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I can say about this movie. It is, like you guys have said, like just absolutely amazing. It's just a beautiful film to watch, and the story is just fantastic. And like that's usually my biggest thing about a movie. Like everything else definitely adds to it, but the biggest thing is if I enjoy the story for me. Um, and I just had this a little bit lower because on my rewatch, I enjoyed some of the other movies so much, but this could like easily be my number one at any point. So
Mhm.
Perfect. All right. Well, we did the ranking. That was great. Kerri, do you have our overall ranking?
yeah, we're gonna remember to do it this time. Okay, so there is a tie. So I'm gonna start at number 11. Our number 11, our lowest ranked, is Bottle Rocket. Our number 10 is The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Three More. Our number 9 is The Royal Tenenbaums. Tied for 8th place, Asteroid City and the French Dispatch.
Cool.
At number 7, Moonrise Kingdom. At number 6, Isle of Dogs. At number 5, The Darjeeling Limited. At number 4, Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Wow.
Number 3, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Number 2, Rushmore. And number 1, The Grand Budapest Hotel.
Wow.
That's so
wow.
cool.
Nice.
Wow. There's some that I'm disappointed in. I'm not gonna lie, but I will say it is still a pretty solid ranking. I like how different we were, but also very similar in a lot of ways too. So yeah. Well, we did Wes Anderson. It's been like a year in the making. We finally got to it. Finally finished this thing. Just a lot got in the way. And it's just hard to talk about Wes Anderson movies sometimes because they're so specific.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of the times, like I think Kerri mentioned at one point, like style over substance, where it's like I feel like he can trick you, and like having so much detail and thought put into something, and then you're like, this must be deep. And then like you might watch it again and go, wait, is there actually really a story in here? Is it good? Yeah. So I had a lot of fun with you guys. Thank you for ranking Wes Anderson with me. And I do want to throw out in the shout out in the comments, guys, if you have any like your own rankings or you have any thoughts on how we ranked it, definitely throw out some comments in there. And do your like and subscribing and everything. And go back and watch some of our older videos because we've done a lot. We've done a lot of filmographies, directors, just a series and stuff. We did like a big Disney one that was like our longest one. Although I think there's one coming up that is approaching about the same length with I think our Adam Sandler one. So check that out when that drops. And we have a lot more coming up. We're very excited for some other things, and you'll find out when they drop. I don't want to really tease much here, but from what I already haven't teased. But yeah, I think that's about it, right? Am I forgetting anything?
No,
I'm not forgetting anything.
I don't think so. Nah, man.
Oh, that's right. Are you ranking with me?
Oh shoot, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah, definitely, man.